Boom. Welcome to Anonymous Bites Back, episode 110. I would like John to bring us in with this episode.
Yeah, because tonight we got like a special guest in. We've been waiting for him for a while, and we are very honored to announce that we have our friend Commander X in the show tonight. Welcome. I'm glad you can finally talk in person right now and just
Oh, it's
say
great.
anything. Go
It's
ahead.
great to be on. It's great to be on with you guys. You guys are the coolest cats on internet radio, and it's a pleasure to join you tonight. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you can just say anything you want. It's like we don't really have like any guidelines or rules or whatever. It's just like as natural as possible, I guess. So.
Well, I usually start out polite enough, and then I get more crass and more of a shithead as the night wears on. So I'm sure there's plenty of time for me to show my darker side.
Yeah, yeah, whatever you think is safe, really.
No, I think it's going to be a blast. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I listen to you guys every week, and it's a 4 hour show, and you manage to keep my interest throughout the entire 4 hours every week. So it's a pleasure to be a part of that. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
That's-
last week was really interesting.
yeah.
I loved last week. I loved last week. It was a great show.
Yeah, that we had
Yeah,
those
it
guests
was a
come on.
good
That was
show.
completely unexpected.
I was like a raid.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe that's what it was. You never know.
Hey, yeah, maybe we should just start talking about yeah, like your history, how you became involved with anonymous activism.
Well, that goes back quite a ways, 2008 or so. Uh, in my book, Behind the Mask, really details that particular story. But I discovered Anonymous by way of the fact that they had hacked the Epilepsy Foundation of America and had placed a GIF, an animated GIF, on the front page that had been scientifically, I guess, proven or whatever to uh, be quite disturbing to brain patterns, and especially if you were an epileptic, you could actually, and I guess several people did end up going to the hospital or whatever because of this gift that was placed on the front page of the Epilepsy Foundation. And so that was my first really introduction as a hacktivist to Anonymous, and I wasn't impressed, to say the least. I wasn't impressed, and I decided to start following them and keeping an eye on them more or less because I thought they were dangerous in the information activist world. I thought they were a bad thing. And then, if you read the book, throughout the course of the next couple of years, my opinion changed, and it changed slowly at first, and then more radically around the time of when WikiLeaks was shut down by Visa and MasterCard in 2010, and the ensuing attacks on PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, Swedish prosecutor's office, on and on and on. That series of op payback attacks
Hmm.
was sort of cemented for me. The idea that Anonymous was not only a good thing, but perhaps one of the best things that humanity has ever caused to come into existence. I mean, I became a real true believer, I think, during the moment of those attacks. And then from there on, it was, into the freedom ops and, everything. HB Gary Federal, the whole bit, all of it. But so that was, it began in 2008 with Anonymous anyway. My activism, my own personal activism, goes back to the 80s. I became an active protester during the anti-apartheid movement in my 20s, back in the 80s, and I spent several years in that protest movement with like boots on the ground and actually in the streets doing campus lockdowns. Mostly, I worked with campuses in the New England area. Uh, that was sort of my specialty. Traveled the campuses during the anti-apartheid movement. Yeah, so probably I'd say at least 30 some odd years I've been involved in activism. I haven't added it up lately, but it's been a few decades of activism. Did I lose everybody?
No, you didn't.
No.
Okay.
We're here.
This is a quiet. This is better than Skype.
Oh yeah,
So,
Skype had
anyway,
some connection
Yeah,
issues.
we always.
some-
Every time I've used Skype, it's always had one issue or another. You know.
Yeah. That's
well,
not,
I'd like to
not a
try
show
this
without
one with the
problem.
station. I might do some experimentation. So anyway, I hope that answered the question. But yeah, I mean, and then the rest of it's kind of detailed in the books. I mean, Dark Ops kind of details my time that I spent in Canada and what I did with that time, which was a considerable amount of things actually. That I was involved in everything from Operation Ferguson to Op Israel to Op Bahrain, and there's probably about 10 different ops that are detailed in the Dark Ops book, the second book, which talks about what I did with my time in Canada. And then I'm sure you know, or some of your listeners might know, I'm in Mexico now, and so the third book due out in July will tell the story of how that came to be. How did I go from Toronto, Canada to central Mexico?
Yeah, that is interesting.
What that means, how I got here. I actually came on foot and by bike. So it's quite. There's a video that you can see. It's on a website called OperationGoldenEagle.cf. That's common spellings. Operation Golden Eagle.cf. Golden Eagle is actually the national bird of Mexico. If you need help with that, and there's a video there that sort of gives a brief sort of visual documentary. It shows me starting out in a motel room in Toronto, and it shows I used a couple of different bikes. I actually went through 2 bicycles total. One of them actually even had a trailer. As I approached the Mexican border, I needed a lot more water, so I hooked a trailer up to it, and you can see in the video, you can see me approaching the Mexican border. And then you see the moment when I went across, I walked across, you can see the border post about 5 kilometers behind me, and I'm coming down a dirt road. And the shot there, the final shot of the video is shot from the top of a black SUV that's about 5 kilometers from me at the time, a telephoto lens. And they filmed, that was my recovery team, and they filmed my crossing of the border with a telephoto lens. And so you can actually see me coming across the border post, and it's an unmarked border post. There's nobody there, just me walking down the dirt road, and I have a upside down American flag over my shoulder. And that was the moment I entered Mexico. So
you crossed the border. You crossed the border on like a special day, right?
I crossed. I actually spent an extra day on the American side, literally hiding about 1.5 kilometers from the border. It was the longest day of my life. There was border patrol everywhere, on horseback, on foot. They had drones, they had planes. It was insane, but I wanted to cross on the morning of the 5th. I actually could have crossed on November 4th, but I wanted to cross on Guy Fawkes Day. So I actually had to hunker down in the desert for an extra day. And there's a shot in the video on the website. One of the final shots, you see me sitting there working on the press release. I'm assuming I'm going to make it anyway, and so I'm like under a bush, like working away on the computer on the press release, and I'm only like 1.5 kilometers from the fence, from the border, and I waited until 3 in the morning. I came across, I think, between 2:30 and 3 a.m. I cut my way through the fence and stepped across into Mexico. And then early the next morning, I was picked up by my recovery team, who were expecting me. It was a hairy thing, actually. They were off by about 20 kilometers, but we had radios. We had GPRS.
That's good. I was going to say 20 kilometers is a lot.
Yeah, they were off by about 20 kilometers. It was hairy for a minute. That was right at the edge of the radio's abilities, and it was a combination of the radios, as well as I was able to get one analog bar, not any kind of digital phone service, but I was able to get emergency analog service that they had out there. Sorry about the noise, guys. It's a noisy part of the city that I live in. So I finally got a hold of the team, and they found out where I was, and then they came down that road and parked and just waited for me to walk down that road, film me as I came across and walked down the road. So it was a hairy moment. I actually left all my water in the United States, assuming that my team would not let me down. So I was for a brief moment I wondered if I was actually going to die in the desert because I was like, fuck, they don't show up. I've got like not a drop of water. And then I'm actually thinking maybe I could sneak back into the States and get my water. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I didn't know what the fuck to do, but it is all cool. Within a few hours, I ended up in a hotel in Juarez, and we released the press release on the evening of November 5th, and the video. We finished the video up actually that night. I still had dirt all over me from the desert, and I was editing the final edits on the video to put it out, and there it was. Here I am in Mexico, seeking political asylum, and then of course on December 24th, we announced that I also brought my sister here to safety in Mexico. She came legitimately, but we snuck her in during the Christmas season. Well, they were actually expecting me to go pick her up. They had staked out her house in advance, waiting for me to go try to get her. And at the same time that they were outside of her house in the state of Maine, I was 3,000 kilometers south on the Mexican border crossing. That's actually what was going on. But they thought I was going to get her. They've actually harassed her for years. She's got her own story to tell about why she sought sanctuary down here. But it's basically because she's related to me. Essentially, she's been harassed for years because she's my
sister. Yeah.
So we flew her in on December 24th, and we announced that to the world that she was safe as well. And so that was a sub-op of Operation Golden Eagle. We actually called it Operation Candy Cane because she was coming on Christmas. So we thought that'd be kind of cool. And that's that. And here we are in Mexico, and so far things are going. They're positive on the legal front. Our discussions with the Mexican government and everything. But what we really need is to raise some funds for some legal counsel, either that or to discover an activist attorney here in Mexico who would be willing to, have the balls really to step up to a case like this. But we do have some paperwork that we have to wade through that the Mexican government has sort of put in front of us as a hurdle, and we need a Mexican attorney to be able to help us navigate that. So that's kind of where we're at right now with the political asylum and refugee status, that sort of thing.
If any of our listeners have some contacts, feel free to message us. If you've got contacts with any legal teams in Mexico, activist legal teams. I know we've got some people that were involved in protesting stuff down there. Please message us.
We've actually approached a couple of immigration. We've actually approached a couple of immigration attorneys here in Mexico who are really good. And to be honest with you, they're not activist attorneys, and they absolutely don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They just don't want that kind of attention on them. This is a very political case, and we've done most of the political work, most of the discussion and communication that needs to go on with the Mexican government has already been done. Most of what we need now is just an expert to help us, jump the hurdles that the Mexican government has put in front of us. So it's really pretty sewed up. We just need an attorney that doesn't mind the limelight. Obviously, there'll be a big press conference down here in Mexico when it happens, when we actually get the asylum papers. We would want him there at that press conference to explain to the world how this happened. And so it would bring a lot of attention to whatever attorney took the case. And some attorneys dig that. Some attorneys want that kind of attention. And mostly those attorneys tend to be activist kind of attorneys.
Uh-huh.
And so the language gap is a big problem. Everything's been a problem down here, to be honest with you. There was an attempt on Amy Beth, my sister's life, to do with all of this. There was an assassination attempt, and she was run off the road and quite grievously injured. Her back was broken, her leg was crushed,
Jesus.
and her medical needs down here in Mexico are considerable because of that. So a lot of our efforts have been put into trying to just find basic supply lines. How do we get prescription drugs? How do we deal without having Medicaid in America now? You know what I mean? That kind of shit, So there's been a lot of fundraising that we've done on Operation Golden Eagle. If anybody goes to the website, there's still an active fundraiser website up. Hey, if you can shoot a penny or two in there, the costs are considerable. We have a really decent compound that we call Haven. It's a safe house. But everything down here is basic. You do your own shit down here. You do your own water. So, for instance, water works by what's known as an ancient system from Rome. It's an artesian system. Your water is on your roof. No, I'm not even shitting. And so, everything in life is difficult. You know what I mean? Because all that shit's got to be dealt with. All of that's got to be set up. Even even broadband is a hassle, and everything's a hassle. So we've been just working hard, scrambling hard, and any help people can give us is great. We're collecting donations, but also we really need to find this attorney. I don't think we'll ever raise enough money to actually pay somebody, because nobody wants the case. We did. We had money to pay somebody, and they refused us. So we just need an activist attorney that's willing to step up, and it's kind of a good trade-off. If you want attention, we can give you plenty of that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? If that's coin with you, then we've got something to trade, because we'll bring you all the attention you ever wanted. But that's where we're at now.
Maybe
We're
you
hopeful.
should mention your different books and where people can buy them. Some people might not want to donate, but everyone wants like a nice book about these subjects that they're interested in.
I appreciate the compliment. I have two books out now. The first one is called Behind the Mask: An Inside Look at Anonymous, and it's available at www.behindthemask.cf. And that tells the first 4 years of like my sort of involvement in Anonymous. It runs sort of roughly from 2008 to 2012, about the time that We Are Legion came out, the movie,
Yeah.
which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with. But that covers the first part of my story, which was pretty harrowing. It talks about my escape on foot into Canada, going over an unfenced part of the border with Amber Lyon from CNN. And it tells the story of my original arrest and capture, all of that. It's a pretty interesting story, as stories go. And I'm saying that in light of the fact that it happened to me, I find it surreal even looking back at it. And then my second book, Dark Ops, actually covers pretty much the next 4 years, from 2012 to 2016. And that covers pretty much the period of time that I spent in Canada in political exile, which wasn't terribly exciting on the adventure front, like as far as being chased, because I really wasn't being chased anymore. But it talks a lot about the operations that I did, because I had so much time on my hands. I was in safe houses and whatnot. I was able to work really hard and accomplish a lot in Anonymous especially. I was instrumental in a number of very powerful historic operations, and I wanted to sort of crack those operations open. And these were big ops, like ops that everybody knows about, like Operation Israel, Operation Bahrain, Operation Ferguson. Speaking of Operation Ferguson, this Saturday on my radio show, X Speaks, we're going to have Tefpo, who's a St. Louis rapper who was sort of instrumental in the Operation Ferguson and the whole Ferguson uprising, the Black Lives Matter movement, all of that. Sorry about the noise, guys. Like I said, it's a noisy place in the city, and I'm trying to find somewhere to go. I'm like on the back patio now, so.
No worries.
But and so Dark Ops sort of just covers a lot of those ops. It covers one that in particular that kind of amazes me that nobody. One of the things when I released Dark Ops, and by the way, just if somebody's interested in Dark Ops, it's www.darkops.cf. One of the things that blows me away about Dark Ops is in Chapter 1, I talk about how we did some election hacking back in 2012 and did some interesting things. And that really hasn't seemed to get a lot of attention in the media. I thought I thought everybody would be crawling all over me to talk about election hacking after admitting that me and my crew actually got in 2012 and did some interesting things in regard to the national election. So, but Dark Ops is a really good book. I mean, I actually like Dark Ops better than Behind the Mask myself personally, and I argue with my sister all the time. She loves Behind the Mask, but I think Dark Ops, from a hacking standpoint, especially from a hacktivist standpoint, I think might be a lot more interesting. It really breaks open those ops. It talks about how they started, from individual historic moments, and then goes on to describe like sort of what our tactics were, what our strategies were, and how we were effective in those ops, or not if we weren't, but most of the time we were. And I think Dark Ops is a much more interesting book. And then the third book, which hasn't come out yet, it comes out on Independence Day, July 4th, is the story of what we were just talking about how I came to be here in Mexico. And it's called Exiled for the Mask, the story of Anonymous Operation Golden Eagle. And it was quite an op. We spent $15,000. We did not scrimp on any amount of equipment. I had the best equipment literally money could buy to get here. I mean, yeah, I came here mostly on foot. It was 7,325 kilometers, and I got here. A lot of that was on foot and on bike. But I had the best gear money could buy. I always knew where I was and when I was, and just, I mean, we didn't. The book will tell the whole story and describe, how we did it. And it won't talk about names. We're going to use a lot of pseudonyms for people who were involved because it will be some time before we'll be able to identify the actual people who helped me get here. But there were, there were a lot of people involved to help me do this. I didn't do it alone. You could not possibly do something like this alone. And so I think that in the history of Anonymous, as far as covert operations goes, Operation Golden Eagle kind of takes the cake. Nobody's ever done anything quite like this in the history of hacktivism. We knew it, I knew exactly how to get here. Everything was planned every step of the way. And it worked. The bottom line is two, not just one myself, but two dissidents, my sister as well, ended up getting here safely to Mexico, despite every effort by the federal government to prevent us both from getting here. So we did it. We tricked them and we got here.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, darkops.cf for Dark Ops, exiled for the Mask, CF for exiled, and then behindthemask.cf. Or you can go to commanderx.info. That's got the sites too as well. And all the books are available in hardbound, paperback, as well as ebook. The ebooks are only like $2. And check it out. I can't do anything about the print books, but anybody out there who's too poor or just doesn't want to deal with credit cards or whatever, just ping me on Twitter. I'll give anybody an ebook for free. It's a coupon code, and you just go to the site and download it for nothing. But it's either way, it's only $2. But I don't want anybody to not read it because they don't have $2. So if somebody wants to read it, just ping me on Twitter. My handle is @CommanderXAnon if you're not familiar, and then I'll comp you out a free copy.
That's amazing.
Am I still
by
on?
the way.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how the third book comes out. I'm hopeful. I mean, it's quite a story. I mean, not many people have done anything quite like this to hike and to ride a bike 7,000 kilometers to get free. I knew in the midst of it, I was actually sad. I mean, that night as I approached the border at about 3 a.m. at the Mexican border, I was actually sad. I was like, the greatest adventure of my life is about to end. It's over. I made it. And there was a sadness in that because it was so harrowing. I mean, I got shot at by hunters in Manitoba. I got, there's just so much shit that I fucking went through, having to cross 2 international borders to get here. I had to cross into the United States, then sneak across the U.S., then into Mexico. It was a lot. It was pretty harrowing. So
They almost had you at Niagara
hopefully the
Falls,
book.
didn't they?
No, I didn't go that way. I came in through the Midwest. I dropped in via Manitoba into North Dakota, which is the most rustic area of the border that you can possibly get, the Canadian border. That's near anything. I mean, you have to be near a city. Eventually, you've got to get to civilization when you cross. So that was the best of both worlds, all possible possibilities, because it was a very rural, rustic crossing. There was no fence, no nothing. There was 800 meters of corn, and then that was it. Once I exited the corn, I was in America. And that, I was in North Dakota. It was that simple. It was barely marked at all. There was a mound, sort of like a mound of grass there, and that was it. Not even a ditch like there was in British Columbia. The first time I came across, we had to go through a ditch, but this time it was almost barely nothing. If I hadn't had the GPS, the handheld GPS, I wouldn't have known that I'd even crossed into the States. So.
Hey, so you talked about your books. Maybe you can tell us about like the difficulties you have while you're like living in this situation, and then you're still trying to like maintain your free speech and like continue the publishing
Well,
of these
actually
books.
Well, that's what this is all about. I mean, look at the situation that you've been publicizing on your show. I publicized it some on my show. I'm actually going to do eventually an entire show based on it. But the whole Akron Phoenix 420,
Yeah.
and the whole Akron, Ohio situation. I mean, again, this is what this is all about. I have gone on over and over again at length. There's so many ways that you can slice this, but the simple fact of the matter is that it's political persecution. To threaten people with these enormous, decades-long sentences, which for somebody at my age, maybe Phoenix Akron might survive a sentence like that. That's a death sentence for me. That's a life sentence. I won't get out of prison with a 30-year sentence. Okay, I'm not going to live. I'm not going to live that long. So, fuck that shit. And that's what this is about. Is they don't care about locking you up. They just want to get you to stop. They just want Anonymous and the hacktivists to stop. And I can prove this. I can prove this conclusively. For instance, how come it is that CFAA violations, especially when they have to do with DDoS, are almost 100% exclusively anons in the dock for these charges? How come? For instance, we don't ever see Jester and any of his crew? He goes around DDoSing everything in fucking sight. Those people do. Those Patriot hackers. Okay. How come you never see a fucking Patriot hacker in the dock for a CFAA charge ever?
I don't know.
And that's the proof, man. It's all about Anonymous, man. They exclusively target Anonymous with this, and it's a war. That's a war. That violates every standard of justice there ever was. And they've wanted to shut us down since WikiLeaks. That's what it's all about. It really started that day when we took down MasterCard in 2010, and that was that. Somebody somewhere said, "Fuck that. We got to shut these people down forever." And it's been a war ever since. And they kick us in the face with like something like the Akron kid, and then we're going to kick them back. You wait and see if the U.S. government doesn't get massively fucking hacked, especially if they mistreat this kid, which it already appears that they are. It appears that they're already mistreating him. So they're going to get kicked in the face over this. There's no doubt in my mind that and that's where it is. It's a war. I don't think either side is even really winning at this point, but we're the one taking the casualties. So, you know what I mean? We're the ones with people going down constantly for these charges. So, I don't know. That's why I came here, because it's like, fuck that. Why? You're, even if you get found innocent, you're locked up in prison for 3 years. Did you know that? That's the average time it takes to resolve a CFAA case, even if you end up pleading guilty, is 3 years. So if you don't make bond, like maybe this Akron kid is not going to make bail, if you don't make bail, man, that's it. You're in there for 3 years, even if you're found fucking innocent. You just gave up 3 years of your life. You're shut down. You're silenced for 3 years, and that's what they want. That's what it's really all about. They want you to shut the fuck up and sit down. And
yeah, but
so,
isn't like the opposite? Isn't like the opposite happening then? If now you're like arresting this Phoenix kid, and like all anons are talking about it. It's like thousands of anons.
They don't ever. They will never get that. They will never understand that for every one of us who falls, 10,000 of us rise up. I mean, they're never going to.
Even for the smallest win, people stand up and enjoy. They clap for us when we have any action that shows that the people can actually fight back, and that drives them crazy. Because they'll try everything they can. When they arrest somebody, they try to bury it completely. Right? If an op goes on that's successful against, some of these really evil organizations, right? The people that are oppressing us, right? Everyone on our side rejoices. It gets shared to places and reshared. The story gets reshared. It's, every scratch that they get seems like a huge bloody nose because of the amount of support that just the world culture has came down to. Like, at the end of the day, I would say, Anonymous and Water Protectors are literally the world's only superheroes, right? And the people, I 100% those organizations like that.
I 100% agree. And what they don't understand, because even all Americans, I'm going to make a statement now. It's kind of broad, but I think this is an important thing for anons who are listening to really wrap your mind around. Okay, Anonymous is a global collective. The tendency, especially with American anons and Americans in general, and that includes law enforcement, media, the journalists who cover anonymous issues, and anons themselves, they tend to think of what goes on in Anonymous USA as the edge of the universe. That's it. Their viewpoint is so parochial within that they They honestly, how many good Anons do I hear say, "Oh, Anonymous is dead because of the infighting"? Nothing could be further from the truth. Now, Anonymous USA, okay, the Anons within that one fucking country are at odds with each other, and that's a problem for them being effective in that country. But go to the website anonymousglobal.org. Okay, that's a website that I helped to curate. We have over 100 national cells in Anonymous that have Twitter accounts, websites, and a presence, an organized presence. That's half the countries on Earth. There's like an anonymous fucking Monaco and shit. I mean, there's anon cells that you would just shock you. Okay, in the most tiniest of places. Maybe that's only one or two cats doing that shit in that country, like say Anonymous Afghanistan. Okay, I can't imagine that that's more than a couple of activists in Kabul, but it exists. It exists. Okay. Anonymous is a global collective. In Venezuela, down here in Central and South America, they are so powerful. They are already ripping shit up in Venezuela, in Honduras, in Nicaragua. They're huge and scary in Mexico. Okay, so they are a huge presence and organized presence down here, and they don't have no problems. They don't have no issues or infighting or shit like that. But again, there's a wall that exists for Americans, especially, that if it isn't in English and if it doesn't involve America, then it doesn't exist. So you hear people actually arguing that, oh my God, Anonymous is dead, when I'm sitting here on my Twitter feed watching them tear shit up all over the fucking world every day. Every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
How is that dead? How is that even slightly motherfucking dead? You know? And so I think law enforcement too sees it that way. They see their target, they see the enemy as only the Anons in the USA, when they don't realize that those Anons in the USA are going to get help from Anons in Palestine, Anons in the Philippines, Anons in fucking Nicaragua and Honduras and Ecuador are all going to come to the to rally to around any Anon that goes down, and that includes America. So they don't see the global collective, and that's a problem I think for all the way around. The media doesn't see it. The law enforcement doesn't see it. Not that I give a shit, but Anons, I think Anons also in America are very guilty of this, of having these blinders on and thinking that that Anonymous is just 4chan and just America and just that sort of Western Anon culture. But if you go to a site like anonymousglobal.org and look around, you'll see that not only are there far more resources available than most people realize, to get involved with Anonymous. The site is filled with links to click on and stuff to check out. But it's also it is truly a global collective at this point. And it's so much more powerful and so much more effective in other places that aren't the Western world. Africa, wherever you have people that are inordinately disenfranchised, like South America or Africa, you're going to have very strong anonymous presences in those areas of the world, because Anonymous is particularly attractive, if you will, to underground activists within places where there's a huge amount of disenfranchisement. So there's so much more going on in Anonymous than HCI.
I think you're 100% correct, and I think to our benefit, our opponents, when they do come out and do some of these actions, and when they don't realize the interconnectivity, that's the point of the internet. Like it's like you don't even understand how any of this works. Shutting down one of our pages doesn't make us silent. It makes us louder. More people share it because they know you don't want to see that information. It's something that we've talked about on here a lot, and it just seems like they don't understand how Anonymous works, how the internet works, how social media works, any of that, in how they react to things. There hasn't been a time where they've locked somebody up, where we've let it go, where we don't constantly post about it, where, there's never been a time where they put something on the internet and then deleted it real quick, and it didn't pop up 1,000 times more because of it. If they delete a video from there, that makes it go viral. And they haven't seen they just don't understand how that works.
Well, this is part of my central premise in hacktivism of why information activism is actually a more effective weapon than even kinetic force, because Guns and bombs and bullets are one-way information, man. It's just, a bullet just goes, it hits, and that's it. But information can literally spread in seconds, the speed of light, around the world and change literally everything. It can stop wars. In fact, in Dark Ops, I talk about that in Off Israel, where we stopped the Israeli army in its tracks, and we did it with hacktivism. We did it with information activism. And that's, I'm not a natural pacifist. I'm not a non-violent individual. If I actually thought that kinetic force were the most effective way to revolution,
I'd be all over.
I'd be the first one to pick up a gun. I'd be the first one to pick up a gun. But information activism, I'm attracted to it because it's effective, incredibly effective.
Well, when you look at like this last week, we've kind of been saying this has been a really bad week for racists on the internet. And, people had posted on there, you should have, I would have smacked that person, or I would have, I would have beat them up, or this and that. And I said, yeah, before, I would have been the first person to say, yeah, knock them the fuck out. But it's more effective to record them being racist as fuck, and that, completely and utterly destroy their life and their movement. Anybody that's associated them with all of it. And yeah, bestowing an ass whooping on them, shooting that one person, making the violent stand doesn't seem to have as much of effect as those things do. And that kind of has proven, I've always been on the edge, like on the, on which will work. Will we need violent revolution, or will we do this with technology and unity and solidarity? And it seems like the nonviolent route is the way to go. Now, I always kind of put it into that I'm nonviolent, but I'm not a pacifist in any way. Right? All I'm saying is that we'll use by every means necessary. We'll use everything but violence. Our opponents know violence, right? They breathe on it. That's the one thing that they do know, and they have no idea how to deal with anything that isn't violent.
Well, I think too, there's two different things here. That there's kinetic force, which is literally like bombs and bullets. Okay, and so I think that I would think long and hard before I were to use kinetic force in a revolution, in an uprising. Once you do that, once you take that step, there's no going back. They're going to hunt you forever, and they're going to try to kill you. So it's a pretty drastic step. Violence,
well, and they're really good at it.
Transgressive action, which you can get into the definition of violence all over the place with that. The idea of transgressive action, for instance, breaking the windows out of a Starbucks during a protest. Some people would consider that violence, and I just don't care about the semantic argument. To me, the idea is there's a difference between kinetic force and violence. I oftentimes encourage and blend what people would consider violence, like I said, breaking windows or sabotage or monkey wrenching, what we used to call back in the 80s when the old Earth Liberation Front days, monkey wrenching, going and breaking the equipment of loggers and stuff like that. This is all considered violence by a lot of people. So, I mean, again, kinetic force, guns and bombs, that's a different kind of level. And I think that when we're fighting people that armies, that use kinetic force, I think our best bet is information activism. I don't think we can beat them with kinetic force. I just don't. I mean, you look at Syria, and the Syrian revolution slid right off the plate like spaghetti off fine china. So it's kinetic force.
Well, they've only like we were saying, there really is. They know that kind of violence. They like I said, they thrive on it. The military-industrial complex, that's all they live and breathe, right? The best thing that can happen to them is that kind of violence, is explosions. If they can point to one IED to carpet bomb an entire area to take their resources, they will, right?
Yeah,
so, like,
and we know that
any time,
we know that that's how they behave. So.
Yeah, like we can see that about them. But, I look at it's Standing Rock. We could have stood there. We could get weapons, we're on a reservation. Everybody hunts, right? We could have stood up for a second against the military, against the entire U.S. government, right? It would have been a bloodbath, but we could have made that statement. By not doing that, we were able to spread our ideas everywhere, right? And divest billions and billions and billions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry. Now, which one of those would have been more effective? would people be remembering the last stand of the water protectors, right? Or would they be divesting billions of dollars, which what we want them to do is divest billions of dollars, right? So, I think when it comes up to it, I guess, I really do agree. Any kind of action like that has to be so very, very, very worth it. Now, I personally don't count. If you throw a monkey wrench in an entire system, then yeah, go ahead. Nobody gets hurt. I'm nuts. That's exactly how it has to work.
This is where you can even go, like, once you broaden your mind to the true idea of what Anonymous really is, the global collective, the power of it. There's also another substrata here that people oftentimes don't want to acknowledge or talk about, and that is there's more to underground crypto anarchy, I guess, if you will, or hacktivism, or the hacker underground. There's more to that than just Anonymous. Not all of us, even myself, I can put on a hat and join an Anon-op, but I can also take that hat off, put a black hat on, and go do something that's completely against the rules or the principles of Anonymous. So that those actors are actually out there and doing a lot of damage as well. And this is what we saw in the election. What we saw more than Russian hackers is we saw hacktivism. We saw raw kind of hacktivism. And where we really see that is when you get into cyber warfare, where you cross a line at some point. You're no longer doing online activism. You're doing cyber warfare. That's where we were at with Operation Israel, where we just decided at some point, we rallied tens of thousands of hackers around the world, and they just wiped out everything in Israel. I mean, talk about collateral damage. They took sites off that had nothing whatsoever to do with the IDF, or they were just Israeli websites, right? So it was a massacre of Israeli cyberspace, okay? This goes beyond activism. This is acts of cyber warfare. And this is what happens when you have a civilization that has made a fundamental choice, and we have all made it. I'm sitting here holding a smartphone in my hand. You guys are sitting in front of computers. We have all made a conscious choice to hand our entire lives, our entire world over to the digital realm. Even your light bulbs and your toothbrushes now have IP addresses. Okay, imagine that your toothbrush might have an IP address. That's fucking crazy, okay? So you've turned your entire life over to the digital realm, and unfortunately, there are only a very small percentage of people who have any comprehension of how that shit is actually built and works. And that's us. That's the hackers. That's the ITs of the world and the hackers of the world. And it's almost like literacy. Like, I've had some people say that coding and understanding how the network works, at least in its basic principles, is the new literacy. You're going to have to teach your kids to code the same way 500 years ago people taught kids how to read, because it became important. You needed to learn how to read in order to get on the world. Now that's where we're at again. Coding is the new literacy. People ask me, you're going to teach your kids to code, you're going to give them a computer. I'm like, no, I'm going to give them the parts to a computer. And when they can finally build it, then they can have a computer. It's the new literacy. And so, but until we get to a point where more people understand that, you have a very tiny minority of people, myself, probably some of the people that are on this call with me, have those skill sets, okay? So we have those skill sets. We know how it all works. We can interfere with it or fuck with it or build it, okay? But very few, you take for granted, because maybe a whole bunch of our listeners even are geeks and techno people, but we're in the minority in the bigger picture, in the whole world. There's very few people in this world it's a micro percentage of 1% of people in this world who understand enough about how it works to be able to actually reach into the network and fuck with it. Okay? Yeah. And so that makes us, until you can spread that knowledge, until you can get everybody literate in this thing that the whole world is now run on, this digital realm, until you can get everybody literate for that period of time, we are fucking gods. And we can wreak insane amounts of havoc. I mean, a handful of us could turn the entire internet off in Ecuador. Now think about that, because my crew has explored this. And I would do it obviously outside the flag of Anonymous. But you know what? I've thought about it, and I think the entire nation of Ecuador could do with a few hours off the internet just to fucking think about it. And see, this is
Yeah,
where
I've heard of those. I've heard of those.
you
kind of
have actors.
techniques, yeah.
You have actors. This is where you have actors though that oftentimes step outside, like Anti-Sec or my own crew, who step outside the umbrella of Anonymous. I would never do something like that under the umbrella of Anonymous, but it has been contemplated by hackers outside of the umbrella of Anonymous that maybe we'll just turn it all off. What people don't understand is what we did in Egypt when we turned the internet back on. That's a two-way street. If you have hackers who know how to turn the internet on when it gets turned off, then they can do the reverse. And this is what people need to worry about, be concerned about, because it's not all about Anonymous. There are actors out there with political intent, who don't necessarily have those principles of, keeping the internet on at all costs and stuff like that. So, the lights, I've heard people talk about turning the power off. Turning the power off in a nation is incredibly fucking easy. And there are a number of people in the world that I've spoken to who know how to do it. That would never be done under the umbrella of Anonymous, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be done by people who are political hacktivists at some point. So
I think a lot of us go out of our way to be restrained when it comes to those kind of actions. Just because when you weigh out the positives and negatives, will this have a big enough effect to
and I'd like to think that I've always been pretty circumspect in that regard, but I got to tell you, if they lay a finger on Julian, I'm going to burn the world to ashes. I'm going to rally every
speaking
hacker
of Julian,
I know.
yeah, he's not in a great place. Yeah.
I've got to try to get somewhere where I can hear you. Just the noise in this city is so bad.
And
try to say that one more time.
Something to consider, because not only, indirectly where we've seen, just throughout U.S. history, them going after people's families, our government now has specifically said that they would like to go after people's families and have given the okay, and they've proved themselves to do that over and over again now. So it's not like it's an unfounded.
Well, they went after my sister. They harassed her for years, and I never went anywhere near her. Like, after I began my career in Anonymous, I purposefully cut my family off, and I moved thousands of kilometers away, and I had no contact with them whatsoever for a decade. And yet they still staked her house out constantly. They broke into her house. They raided her, took all her computers. It's endless. And all because she was, her only crime was that she was my sister. And in fact, they created an activist because she was a normal mom, a housewife, okay, until this all broke. And now she's like one of the most rabid Anons in the world. You know what I mean? She actually became Anon. Yeah, she actually became Anon and went from being I think she was even kind of conservative. She was almost sort of Republican-like when she was younger. I don't know if she had any party leanings or anything, but she was definitely a very conservative person when she was raising her children. And now she's, there's Macs everywhere all over the house. And, she spends all her time online working on different Anon stuff. She's an Anon. And so they created, yet another one just by harassing her. But yeah, if they're going to target our families, it gets pretty personal. And it does become cyber warfare. I mean, there are a lot of things that are on the table for me now. I hate to say it, but there are a lot of things that are on the table in secret, that might not have been on the table a few years ago. It's getting pretty brutal. And the choices are getting pretty
that
raggedy,
also touches the Ecuador subject that directly, because now they're like cutting off Julian from the internet and stuff, and then you can say normal people who would never be involved with this become like enraged because they're cutting Julian off. So they want to like show Ecuador then that what happens if you like cut people off for like a few hours.
It's literally so bad. I was reading that the previous Ecuadorian president is reaching out to the Australian government because he still has a dual citizenship between Ecuador and Australia to try and help them out with this legal case.
Yeah, but he says the new one made a deal with the UK because they were cutting off trade relations.
Yeah, and I'm gonna look it up now. I mean, that's no small amount. To put that kind of pressure on someone that has done nothing but tell the truth, whether you like it or whether you like what he said or not. Mm-hmm. Nothing that they have ever posted has had to be retracted because it was false.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
the one thing that he is guilty of is spreading the truth, and the entire UK and all the force that they can put on a country to try to arrest this guy. their goal is to, he's already in a prison situation, even being there. He can't leave the embassy. But to say, look, we're going to, take, millions, billions of dollars in trade away if you do not give us Adrian Assange.
Well, again, I want to reiterate to the world, and especially if there's any like government types listening out there, I want you to fucking listen up, because it's more than just Anonymous involved. There's crypto anarchists. The hacker underground that Julian is really almost a saint in is so much bigger than Anonymous. And one of the hacks during the election that really caught my attention that nobody wants to talk about anymore, but when they did this before. They pulled his internet. They pulled Julian's internet during the fucking election. Remember? And does anybody remember the response? A handful of kids took out a third of the U.S. internet for 6 hours.
Oh, the DIY hack.
Of the entire U.S.
Yeah.
fucking internet for 6 fucking hours. Julian had to go on Twitter and actually ask him to stop. Okay. Now, this is my fucking point. Okay, is that was not done under the flag of Anonymous? Of course not, because that involves turning the internet off, and that's not something Anonymous does. But that doesn't mean that those hacktivists, and so my point is that maybe Ecuador needs to learn a lesson. Maybe everybody in Ecuador needs to learn a lesson. How about if the plug were pulled on the entire country for about 6 fucking hours? And so everybody in Ecuador can sit there for 6 hours and wonder what it's like to be locked in a little room and have somebody pull the plug on your fucking internet. And I think that this is where we're going. And if they touch Julian, that underground that is far more brutal and vicious than any Anon will ever be. Let me tell you something. The hacker underground goes back to the fucking 80s and Kevin Mitnick and shit, okay? This is shit that these people are for real. These are real soldiers out there on the net ready to like really fuck some shit up. And this is what you want to look for next, and this is where the action is going to be if they're foolish enough to do something like lay a finger on Julian. There's other trigger moments too. I think if they'd have laid a finger on Lori Love, that would have caused it. That would have snapped it. There's a lot of people in the broader hacker underground that really supported Lori way outside of the boundaries of Anonymous. He was very popular in that crypto anarchist sort of underground. And like I said, that underground doesn't resort to the principles. It doesn't believe in the principles of Anonymous. It almost has no rules at all. It's a very scary motherfucking place. And you're gonna piss off very powerful, very scary fucking people if you touch Julian. People who will pull the lights out on an entire country or an entire continent. People who will put the internet out on entire fucking countries, and not even think twice about it. People who will collapse the financial markets. People who are prepared right now to collapse the entire financial markets if they touch Julian. That's what's coming. So Anonymous will find out quickly that, it's only as strong, really, in a sense. I mean, on the streets it's very powerful, but on the internet it's only as strong as those hackers who sign up to be a part of that. And those hackers can also put that Anonymous mask down and act outside the purview of that collective, which means that anything goes. And that's important to remember. I mean, from our perspective, this has become personal, and I don't think there's anything that's not on the table with me right now. For hacking, collateral damage, or whatever, there's nothing that's not on the table at this point. There is nothing I'm not prepared eventually to do if the circumstances warrant it. And there are others who feel this way.
Yeah, maybe you should also mention that this hacker underground you're talking about, they actually built the internet, and they're not like the people who destroy the internet, like the media wants to always say. But this hacker underground from the 80s, they're actually responsible for building and creating the internet how it is now. So of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course. I mean, they're the ITs of the world and whatnot. But also, it's broader than that. Nothing in life is cut and dry. I remember giving an interview and talking about the Anons in the Eastern Europe and the Balkans and in Russia. And I've had a lot of contact with Anons and hacktivists in that area of the world. And it's a very different culture, and there are very different ethical standards over there. For instance, it's not unusual for a hacktivist in that part of the world to support himself by carding or by stealing from banks or whatever. And this is not considered a gray area the way it might be in the West. It's not frowned upon. In fact, it's I wouldn't call it the norm, but it's a pretty common way for hacktivists to earn a living is to also hack as black hats. And it's not, like I said, it's not necessarily frowned upon. In fact, the anonymous Russia cell was for a while supporting itself by blackmailing Russian politicians. They would steal their emails, and then they would give them a choice: either we publish it on our leak site, or you give us $5,000 to continue our efforts. You know what I mean? And so, I mean and that's not, like I said, the ethical boundaries are different in that part of the world. So you have to be one of the things, if you want to network on a global level, you have to be non-judgmental about differences like that, about cultural differences, about ethical differences. If you want to form any kind of a network, you can't be so judgmental. So, my point, I guess, is that the hackers that make up the broader hacker underground beyond anonymous, they're not all. Let's put it this way: there's not many of them you'd want your sister or your daughter to go out with on a date. You know what I mean? I mean, they're not the nicest people in the world, and they're about to become enemies of the world if Julian is touched. I guarantee it. I mean, I guarantee that they will burn the world to the ground, and I'll be there leading the charge, and there won't be any rules. It will be a scorched earth policy if they touch Julian. So I suggest they just let him the fuck out of there. And he's free to come here to Mexico. I mean, there's a room right here with his name on it. If he doesn't want to go to Ecuador because it's become too tense with them, he's more than free to join us here in Mexico. There's plenty of room. I mean, that's actually what we're trying to do here in Mexico with this safe house. We're trying to actually build something where dissidents could come. So.
Well, and I mean, look, I mean, I agree. Just let him go. Like, just let it go. He's going to continue to spread the truth. Maybe you should be less corrupt. Those are the two choices. We're moving towards a world that is against the kind of corruption that they stand for. On the same note, we've seen this over and over again. MLK, Malcolm X, Che Guevara. Every time they have tried to make an example of her, Leonard Peltier, Red Fawn, every time that they've tried to make an example like this of someone, it takes them from being someone that may or may not have been forgotten completely by history to becoming a symbol. To becoming what causes people. Che Guevara may or may not have died an old man or in some corruption scandal, right? But instead they turned him into the symbol for freedom, the symbol for fighting the system. And that wasn't even what he stood for at the time. But by doing even Jesus, you can put that same every time they've tried to literally crucify one of us to make an example, it's had the opposite effect.
Well, I'd like to think even in my case, I didn't have to die, thank God. But I mean, even in my case, I mean, running me out of the country in such a dramatic fashion was probably the worst thing they could ever have done. If they'd have left me alone, there would have been nothing to write books about. I mean, it would have been a boring story of me just sitting in coffee houses in San Francisco and fucking around with governments and corporations. But running me out of the country, in a sense, making me a living martyr, I guess, if you will, man without a country, running me into exile has simply, given me a story that's so compelling that now people all over the world are reading this story and, hopefully maybe thinking about things and being inspired to maybe make some choices.
Well, and that's the key to those ideas. Like, the story that they created is, does get people inspired and does get people to follow and look into things and wake up to things that they never would have before. And it comes because it's definitely true. It's definitely true.
Well, believing that is what's kept me going. I mean, to be honest with you, it's an important point because, I mean, when you talk about what drives somebody like myself in such weird and extreme circumstances as my own, that's what it is. It's the weight of history, you know what I mean, strapped across your shoulders, because you realize that, my actions and my words and my thoughts and my deeds almost on a daily basis now could be, could cause other people to come, I guess initially to their senses. You know what I mean? I mean, I never actually, until I heard my sister's story and started talking to her, in detail once we got here to Mexico about the transformations that she went through. I never really thought that normal sort of, I guess, what do they call them? The zombies, the yuppified zombies of the world. I never actually thought there was anything that could change them. You know what I mean? I really have become sort of cynical over the years that there just doesn't seem to break into the mainstream mindset that seems so locked into hypnosis. But when I talk to somebody like my sister, I realize there are things that are provocative enough in this world that can wake people up. And sometimes it's these stories. Sometimes it's these actions of a few who can, open other people's minds to their own possibilities, their own actions that they can take. I end every book that way. Every book that I talk about that at the end, that the things you read about in this book, you need to go out and do them. I mean, I emphasize that in the book. I demystify myself and the whole story by telling people this is, this was not rocket science, and this is stuff that you need to go out and learn how to do and be bold and be brave because the world's waiting on you. The world's expecting you,
And I think
there's nothing special about me other than I'm just too stubborn to fucking quit,
Well, I think that's
other than an extraordinary level of stubbornness. I mean, that's really all there is to me. That's what's.
I think with a lot of us, it's just stay in the course, like not giving up. That's really a part of the whole thing. And I 100% agree. People are definitely waiting for it. They see the things that are around us. In some cases, it's undeniable. And they really do just need someone to stand up and tell them, look, it can be done, right? That little bit of unity. We can expose these things. We can change these things. We can have an effect on where our world goes. That's an idea that everybody seems to be waiting for, and just waiting for the people to stand up and do it. But it takes one person to do it so that the rest of us know that they can.
Well, that's why the concept of Anonymous and the Mask, I think, is so important. It really lets people know that you don't have to sign a contract. You don't have to put your face out there in the world and cause you and your family to have to have hardship and everything like that in order to make a stand. In Dark Ops, I answer a question that everybody always asks. They ask every pundit that's ever been about Anonymous. When Beulah Coleman goes on news, they always ask her, what is Anonymous? And everybody's got an answer, right? But my answer in Dark Ops was kind of simple. Anonymous is simply the idea of challenging authority from behind a mask. And it is ancient. It goes back to the dawn of fucking time, okay? The idea of, in the Middle Ages, a lot of the secret societies that they had were involved with keeping scientific knowledge from the church because the church wanted to shut down science. And so a lot of secret groups and organizations existed during the Renaissance to keep scientists anonymous and to keep knowledge anonymous. So, again, the idea of challenging authority from behind a mask is ancient, and it's why Anonymous is never going to go away. It's simply a new brand of an old thing, which is man has always realized that to truly challenge tyrannical authority, you're going to have to do it from behind a mask. And to me, that's all Anonymous is. And it's just this is the current sort of modern idea of that. And I think it's going to stick around for this particular iteration is going to stick around for a long time because the iconography was too powerful. The Guy Fawkes mask, that is a very powerful icon. You've got to admit, no matter how many people hate the mask and Warner Brothers gets a cut and yada yada yada, I hear it endless about how the mask sucks. Okay, like your guest last week who from Clownsec who hates the mask. You know what I mean? But I'm sorry, I love the mask. We have masks hanging all over my house. The Haven Safe House here, my sister loves them. She orders them from all over the world, different colors and designs and everything, and they're everywhere. And because to me, the mask is a very potent symbol, a very potent icon of what we stand for, and where we want to go with Anonymous. And I think that encourages the scaredest of people can find courage when they find out how much strength that mask can give them. And I know people who have said, I never dared to go into streets, but then I put the mask on and I was okay with it. I was okay with marching in the streets, And then online, if your activism is online, a lot of people don't want to put their name on their shit.
their social media or whatever, so they can form anonymous accounts. You know what I mean? They can put the mask on, virtually speaking, and can go out there and say their piece, say their mind in a way that maybe they wouldn't do on their normal identified social media like their Facebook or whatever. So again, I think the
But
mask is just a
our
very
our opponents are
a
good
potent
at
symbol of what we
using,
are.
and our opponents are good at using symbol. Anonymous, the mask specifically, is a symbol, and I think it's something that gives all of us strength. I find that strength, and when people ask, I'm a nobody that will fight for everybody. And when I put on
Right.
that mask,
And
nobody knows who you are underneath it. When you stand with other brothers and sisters, if you're out doing something, you don't know anything about them other than it makes us completely and utterly equal. You have no other judgments other than that it's the mask. You might as well be looking in the mirror, right? It makes you
that's right.
realize you are exactly like me.
And even us, all of us on this show, I don't know how many of us are fully doxxed. I don't want to get into it. Obviously, I'm completely doxxed. Okay. So, people go, well, you're not anonymous, X. Well, bullshit. How do you know that dude who 2 hours from now, after the show is over, who jumps into the IRC to work on Pedo Hunt with you, named Joe Schmo, how do you know that's not me? You don't fucking know where I am. No, anybody out there who says they think they know what I'm about, you don't fucking know. How do you know I'm not in half a dozen of your favorite ops and I'm your chum? I might be your best friend online under some other pseudonym, under some other fucking name. You don't think I go jump into IRC as Commander X, do you? And come on, that'd be fucking foolish. I just closed out of the friggin' channel. You know what I mean?
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
You don't know who you're working with in Anonymous. I mean, there are anons all over the place. I am very active, and I am very much anonymous in every sense of the word. That's all I'm saying is, and so, you know, just remember that the next time you're in an IRC and you're working an op with people, you don't know that Barrett Brown couldn't be in there working it with you, or me, and to be honest with you, Julian, you know, I just put that out there, and that's all I'm going to say. That is the possibility.
Yeah, we've
Yeah,
we,
yeah.
Or
we talked
it
about
was
that.
before they cut his internet. It
Yeah, we
was
were
before they
talking
cut
about
his
that the
internet.
last show, but there's it's very easy to access a Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah, sure. And, so the idea of anonymity, the idea of anonymous, I think that's really the central core of it. I disagree with your clown sect friend. This isn't anymore about 4chan. It may have been 10 years ago. That may have been what it was all about. But the fact of the matter is that the people who still want to drag Anonymous back into that 4chan era of just trolls and nothing else, they lost the battle. Revolutionary hacktivists like myself and Barrett Brown and Greg Hausch and many, many others, we essentially took their friggin' memes, we took their iconography, we took their fucking mask, and we took their name, and we created a global revolution against their will because they fought it the entire way. The people who wanted to keep Anonymous as just this sort of nihilistic little group of cyberpunks, okay, they lost. They lost a battle that they fought with the likes of people like myself, who came into the movement and said, you know what, no, we're taking your idea and we're going to make it into something better. We're going to make it into something bigger. And we won. We won the battle because Anonymous, that everybody thinks about today, is this big global thing with masks in the streets all over the world. And that's how people envision Anonymous. That's the Anonymous that the world thinks of now, that history is written about. And you don't know how many people I talk to in South America don't even know what the fuck 4chan is. But they don't care because they just ran their dictator out of their country with a mask. That's what they care about. That's what Anonymous represents to them, is freedom and liberation. And if that pisses people off, like the trolls and the 4chaners, I'm sorry, I really am. But that's what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, well, of course it's not restricted. Of course, it's not restricted to one side like 4chan. That defeats the entire purpose. It's active on the entire internet.
And it's crazy to think about. Like the one thing that has kept us going over 20-year, 30-year periods here is that the internet does evolve. But our core values stay the same. Like I support anybody that's all over the net trolling and making fools look like fools. But there's an actual war going on. There's actual lives that are at stake. There's opponents that need to be fought back with the tools that we have.
It's a very exciting war too. Let me tell you something. let me tell you something, guys. This is so much fun to do too. Like once you really start to get the bigger picture and see the chessboard, I mean, you've got all these wonderful. I'm always fascinated by how many players there are involved in this thing. Like, you've got the Syrian electronic army, you've got the Iranian cyber army, you've got all of the dozens and hundreds of crews and groups and sects and individual actors and cowboy actors and this whole giant war is going on right around people. It's literally flashing in the air around them and in the wires around them is this massive global war that is already ongoing. It's already hot, man. And I don't know. I think it's incredible. I love being a part of it. I love trying to figure it out. I love trying to, like I said, build networks and ally with different crews and try to form armies online. I mean, I think all of that is just, to me, I revel in it. It's I'm good at it. I think anyway. I hope. I mean, so far I seem to have had some success. So I have the respect of a handful of comrades online, and I think it's an incredible time to be alive. But like I said, Anonymous in the West, it tends to be very parochial. They even tend to think of hacktivism as just being locked also within that Western sort of mold of what they think Anonymous is, and it's just, there's so much more going on, and it's so exciting. I think that we are going to win because, like I said, it comes down to the fact that our world runs on this digital realm, and they're never going to be able to outnumber us. There's so few of them on their side who understand how it works. There's more black hat hackers than there are white hats. Let's just put it that way. We've got them outnumbered 1,000 to 1. So I think we'll win in the end, but it's going to be messy. I predict it's going to be messy. I've always predicted that there's going to be crazy shit that's going to happen with countries' lights going out and the internet going out, and the attacks there's going to be more and more collateral damage. More and more innocent people are going to get hurt. But
Hey,
I think in any revolution, there's always that though.
So maybe you want to share a bit about like the events in the Middle East and like the Arab Spring and things, and like how you were involved with these things back then.
Well, of course, the Freedom Ops. I mean, that's what they came to be called. Although we didn't call them that until I think it was Libya, really, or certainly near the end of Egypt, before the term Freedom Operations actually came into use. But I mean, they came on us by surprise. I mean, I talk about it in the book how we came out of the payback attacks, and we were all sort of casting around. What do we do next? What's going to happen next? And for me, it was Barrett Brown who clued me, and he said, keep an eye on the Middle East. And within a couple of days, a small country of Tunisia made the terrible mistake of blocking WikiLeaks in order to prevent a particularly unflattering disclosure that was made the dictator Ben Ali look bad. And I think that initially we began just as a censorship op, just as a way to try to find a way around that block in Tunisia. But then the protests started, and it became so much more than that. And Tunisia kind of set the idea of Anonymous actually waging war. I mean, because the freedom operations weren't protests. We were going in there and we were waging war against dictatorships, cyber warfare. And so I think that the freedom operations really took that's what took Anonymous to that level we were just talking about. That's what changed it from a troll/protest movement into an insurgency, into a true actual revolution, because we were doing damage. We were doing actual damage to governments, actual damage to dictatorships, and they were fighting back. I mean, we got hit by the Iranian cyber army during Op Iran. We got hit by the Mossad a bunch of times during Operation Israel. So they fought back. It was a two-way war. It wasn't just a one-way, like us kicking them and them doing nothing. It's quite exciting. I don't know. Like I said, I love it. I love doing it, and I think I might be good at it. But and that just kind of gave us the idea that we don't just have to protest and stand in the streets, that we can actually really hurt these people, really hurt them where it counts, in their wallets, in their reputations. The freedom operations, the Arab Spring, that was a real eye opener, I think, for a lot of us in the movement. That the possibilities that existed, that a few individuals could wield the power of a state. I mean, think about that. That a handful of individuals could wield geopolitical power. That's pretty fucking. It's kind of frightening almost when you stop to think about it. You know, I guess it depends on who's doing the wielding, right? I mean, but it is kind of
I mean,
terrifying.
that's what it
when you
all.
stop to
That's
think
what
about
it that's what it always comes down to. And I mean, that's a problem with what's going on in the world today. Is it's the people that are yielding the sword that are really the problem. You know, the people that are controlling our lives, that are poisoning us, that are poisoning our land and water, and you know, all the dirty games and corruption that goes on. Right? Those are the people that are in charge, and that's a huge problem. And then you have, a group that is the exact opposite. Come along.
Well, now you're sort of approaching on, are we going to win question? You know what I mean? I mean, you're sort of approaching, is there going to be some sort of final victory where like the elites are thrown down and their heads stuck in a guillotine, and then we all sing kumbaya and hug trees for the rest of humanity's existence? I don't see it. I have always seen, I guess I know in a sense I'm sort of a cynic, but I've always seen revolution as a career choice and nothing more. I think that that the greed for power is perennial in humanity, and therefore revolution needs to be perpetual. I think there's always going to be a need to check power, and always be a sway. There'll be a time when the anarchists and the libertarians have a more of a free world, and they're sort of in the ascendant. And then there'll be times like now where the power hungry and the tyrants and the elites are sort of in the ascendant right now. They're sort of have most of the power in the world, and I think it will always throughout history sway back and forth like that. And I think there will always be a need for people to dedicate at least some part of their life. And I think to some degree you have to have individuals that dedicate, like myself, their whole life to the idea of revolution just simply as a career. And it's very liberating. People think that that's a very depressing thought, that we're not going to win, that there's not going to be some big final utopia. But to me, it actually has the opposite effect. It relieves a lot of stress when you no longer are trying to think, well, you're no longer keeping score. You know what I mean? Like how many brownie points they got versus how many we got. You just let it fly and fight, and realize that it's the fighting that's the point. You know what I mean? That's really all. And the victory is inside yourself. You know what I mean? Resistance is freedom. It's not a means to freedom. Resistance is freedom. And that's the key. Once you understand that, then you understand that if you're fighting, you're already free. You've already
I'm definitely an optimist. I'm definitely on the other side of that scale. Not only are we planning on winning, but we're planning on doing these guys in for good. And I definitely look at it that way.
Hold on.
There's several industries that we can finish off, not because it's impossible, but because we can do it with a small amount of organization. The reason that they're able to
don't take me wrong.
The reason they're able to control us like this is because we didn't have the power.
We can beat a lot.
We got a horrible delay.
I think we will have a huge amount of victories. I really believe we'll have a huge amount of victories. What I'm saying is there's no final victory. There's no final utopia. Can we beat Monsanto? Sure, I think so. I'm an optimist to the point where I think we can bring down the U.S. government. I think it's actually pretty easy. Okay, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that the revolution is over and we hang our masks up on the wall, though. There's just going to be another tyrant, another bully, another fucking Monsanto that's going to come along and try to do something even stupider than the ones before them did. And I guess what I'm saying is that the greed for power is endemic in humanity. It's always going to exist. And I think that people who think that we can somehow eliminate that, they're on some sort of religious or spiritual trip. Okay, and I don't believe. I'm not a believer in any of that shit. So I think that we are already as good as we're going to get, to be honest with you. I really do. We're as smart as we're ever going to get, and we're about as socially and politically evolved as we're ever going to get. And that's that. We're going to get more technologically advanced. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But we're going to bring our same issues and our same problems out into space, for instance, when we become a spacefaring race. We're still going to be fighting wars over this little rock or that little patch of a planet. It's just the nature of mankind to be dickheads, man. I mean, it has to do with the fact that it's biological. We're animals. We're animals. We're not going to ever be angels. We're never ever going to be something pure and spiritual. We're always going to be these biological animals who evolved, and that's where greed comes from. Greed just comes from basic instincts of I got to get as much as I can to stay warm and to take care of myself. I got to get a cave, and my buddy over here, he's got a bigger cave, so I'm going to go knock him in the head, and I'm going to take his bigger cave, you know. And all of it comes from the fact that we're a biological being, and we're always going to have negative, you know, the negative parts of us. We're always going to want to kill. I mean, it is the nature of humanity to want to kill, and so there's always going to be murder. You're never ever going to have a world. I mean, if you take everybody's guns away, they'll just strangle each other.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, it's that simple. You know what I mean? I mean, and so I think that, like I said, I think people should see revolution as a career choice, not as something where you're going to go in, you're going to change the world, and it's going to be perfect. But rather, you go in and you make the world as much better as you can during the time that's allotted. And so, yeah, I think we'll have victories. I just don't think we'll have any sort of final victory. I don't think we're going to see the elites' heads in a guillotine and then all the wealth redistributed and everybody's, like I said, singing Kumbaya and then building spaceships so they can go fly away into the galaxy. It's never going to be like that.
Not in our lifetimes, no.
Humanity is always going to be somewhat fucked up, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that as long as there are people who make the choice to fight back. You know what I mean? As long as we have the anarchists of the world, the underground of the world, as long as that exists, there's always going to be that mechanism of correction. That's what revolution is. It's the mechanism of correction. And so as long as that's not eliminated and wiped out, then there'll always be hope that we can have a better world. But we're never going to have a perfect world. I hope revolutionaries that are just coming into this realize that. You're never going to wake up someday and the world's going to be fixed. It's just never going to happen. I mean, you just keep fixing it and do the best you can. It saves on stress that way. You know what I mean? No, it really does. Because, I mean, for years I worried about how are we going to win. And, you know, maybe we don't win. Maybe your kids win. Maybe your grandchildren win. Maybe we get our teeth kicked down our face. But you know what? The fact is that the fact that we fought is what will inspire our kids to fight. You see what I'm saying? So even if we don't win, we must fight. And we must fight as if we're going to win. Because our children are watching us. And if we want them to continue the battle, then, you know, we've got to stand up. How many hours left do we got to go, guys? This is the longest radio show on internet radio.
We do 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
We will get down to the nitty gritty.
I
There's
know,
no
I listened to your
winning,
shows.
because we've tried to figure out, you know, if we give, you know, just a quick 5-minute, you know, update to everybody, then tons of people get on and you know, complain, hey, we want it as in depth as possible, we want as much information as possible.
Yeah.
And then if we do a 4-hour show and get, you know, everything out on the line, we get the exact opposite. You know, why can't it be shorter? It was way too much. But I urge people to, you know what I mean, you know, listen to what you can when you can. You know, and if there's somebody that goes through and cuts this up to you know, the nuggets of truth that we have through, that's fine too. The point is to get as much information out as possible, you know, and to get as many ideas out as possible. In this case, it's to get a story, you know, out as well. The things that are possible and the dirty tricks that our opponents use against us. You know, what our government is willing to go through to silence the truth. What our government is willing to go through to stop anybody that looks like they're standing up for the people. And
Well,
being able to... No, go ahead. There is a horrible delay on my side.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
There are some lags.
Yeah.
I think that's one of one of the reasons why I really like radio. I think in Anonymous in particular and hacktivism in general, radio seems to be uh, the most powerful media. I think video would be if maybe bandwidth were just a tad cheaper and like video was a little bit more ambiguous. Maybe sort of internet television might eventually take off to be a media for Anonymous. But I think radio is a real standby. It's audio. It's easy to produce. Hell, I pulled a radio station out of my butt in 10 days. Just because I felt like one needed to exist. So now there's another anonymous radio station out there. I think that it's a very powerful media to get a lot of information across. It's very entertaining, at least for me. I love sitting and listening to radio. I listen to a non-ops radio all the time. I listen to you guys every week. So I think radio is very, very powerful media, and I think it's very important. I love the quote. I put it on the website. It was actually a quote by Lorax during an interview that he did with me on X Speaks back in 2012. Where he said that Anonymous speaks to itself via the media, and so it simply makes sense that Anonymous should control its own media. And I think that's a very powerful statement about how, and so that's what we're being a part of tonight. Is we're a part of Anonymous speaking to itself, and that's an important thing. And I think that radio, for me anyway, radio seems to be one of the powerful medias right now that's going. There's been other medias that come and go from time to time that sort of take the ascendant, but right now I think radio seems to have the biggest impact.
And radio's always had this aspect of not being able to control it. You can't, once the radio waves are out there, they're out there. And they can't contain it. Someone can pick up a headset and hear those ideas and talk back any of those things. And they can't control how that works. And I think that's always been, anytime they can't control the media, they really get stressed out. You guys are control freaks.
Ham radio.
Because back in the 80s, we didn't have the internet. Back in the 80s, we didn't have the internet. One of the things that my crew was a specialty of my crew was technology in the 80s. We used backpack FM radio broadcasters. So we literally would put a pirate radio station on a guy's back, and he would run around to protest, and we would tell everybody, we'd have it on the posters even in tiny little letters at the bottom, bring your FM radio, tune into, such and such. And that was our feedback loop. That was our way. We would get messages to that guy, and he would in turn broadcast, well, the cops are coming down, Amherst Avenue, everybody avoid that, that intersection, go another way. And so we didn't have the internet, we didn't have text messaging, but we were able to use pirate radio as a very, very powerful tool. Not only backpack radio stations, but stationary broadcasters as well. But pirate radio, FM radio, was very powerful especially during the anti-apartheid movement, which was my first sort of introduction into protest. So radio always played a role, but back then radio did disappear. You see, you broadcast and then it went out in the air, but then it was gone forever. Now with this new digital radio, this sort of internet radio, it's very different. This show is going to be archived instantly after it's done. It's going to appear on YouTube. I'm going to grab a copy of it so that we can play it on the station over and over again all week long. And people are going to download it by the thousands, maybe millions eventually in history. It's never going to go away. So we've actually entered a realm that's sort of beyond analog radio, where you literally, the words we're speaking right now are literally never going to go away. I mean, they're going to be.
I was going to say, speaking of which, because we've been having issues with YouTube, we've been recording this episode back channel on my end in case it accidentally disappears on purpose by the social media companies.
And I've got several. Val she is a warrior, so she downloads. We got several people that download all of our shows, everything we post, and then archive them at their houses, just unrelated to us, just in case. And
I'll always have you. I'll always have you guys.
It's out there forever.
I won't have the
insurance
previous
policy.
ones, but I won't have the previous ones. But starting at 108, I've got, and then I'm going to download them every week. So and it goes everywhere, and then lots of people listen. Like I like to put my show on Mixcloud. It's very accessible to people and everything, so they can just sit there and sort of hit the play button on whatever episode they want to hear, hear it. And a lot of people hit my Mixcloud site to listen to the old episodes. Surprisingly, even the ones back from 2012 when I did this before. So internet radio is something I've always been a big believer in. I got involved in internet radio in 2000 when Shoutcast and Y365 and all of them were brand new, and the whole thing was shiny and new. There was no DMCA yet. You could literally stream anything you wanted, whole albums, do whatever you want. There were no rules. There was no royalties. There was no licensing. It's definitely changed a lot. The DMCA definitely regulated the fuck out of the entire industry, but I always thought that there was huge power in internet radio, even beyond analog radio, because of that digital.
And it goes back to the thing about
disappeared.
it goes back to the thing about it not being all about the U.S. So both ham radio and what you would consider pirate radio is very popular around the world, especially in areas where they've got long distance to go. Yeah, and it's you see it, constantly, and people do, they'll put on a broadcast and, just put the little headset up to it and let it play. And sometimes it's coming from just a recorded MP3 player, and they'll broadcast it out. We've seen that plenty of times in Southeast Asia and Africa, where it's just easier. There isn't internet up there. We can't afford satellite, but the information gets out the same way, and it's all done through radio.
Well, and the internet too is becoming very ubiquitous. I mean, one of the things about internet radio is you can download an app on your smartphone to listen to it. And if you look at places where broadband is not penetrating to a great depth, like say Africa, you look at that more closely and you find out that Africans don't tend to have broadband, but they do all have smartphones.
Yep.
They all can listen. You know what I mean? So more and more, there's very little of the world left now that doesn't have some sort of connectivity, some sort of penetration. And again, this is where radio is beautiful because it's just audio. There's very little bandwidth that's necessary. One of the things I play with that I like to hit people to, because I think it's a very powerful tool, is peer-to-peer radio. And I make a point, if you go over to Anonymous Global Internet Radio, the new site that I built this week, I actually do a peer. I simulcast onto a peer-to-peer node to kind of get the idea of. It's called Streamer P2P. You can look it up online, streamerp2p.com, and it's essentially it's peer-to-peer radio. It works on the same principle as BitTorrent or Bitcoin or any other peer-to-peer process, and you don't need any central server. You can put out a stream as big as, like, say, 64 kilobaud, no problem, even on a dial-up line. And then each listener who tunes into your station is then responsible for passing part of that signal on to the next listener, and so on and so forth. And you can end up with 1,000 listeners, but you're just on a single, maybe even a single dial-up line. And it's a very powerful tool for people in parts of the world who want to broadcast but don't have the greatest pipes in the world. Maybe they're on DSL, or they can't afford a central server. They can't afford a Shoutcast server. Peer-to-peer radio will let anybody broadcast without anything. You just download the app, and you literally can be on the air in seconds. You just need somebody to listen. You need somebody to tune in, and then it grows from there. Every person who continues to tune in will be growing that peer-to-peer tree the same way as BitTorrent works and all of those. I think those kinds of technologies are very, very powerful because they can allow us to give internet radio. We take it for granted here in the West. We've got these big fat broadband pipes, and servers are either free or cheap, and they're everywhere. But if you're in, say, Africa or South America and you want to do internet radio, maybe you don't have that. Maybe you don't have those luxuries. But with peer-to-peer, you can still get your voice out there. You can still be heard. So I encourage people to go over to the radio station site and check that out. It's anonymousglobalradio.ca.
Hey, just a quick question for you, because I know you have to do another show in between this one. How long do we have until that happens?
Let me see. I gotta go check. What time is it now?
We're about 2 hours in.
We're kind of spread out.
Yeah, we're all over the world.
I'm 3:36 p.m.
I just came back up to the studio.
Yeah, so I got about 25 minutes, and then I got to leave, and I can come back after. I air a show called Earth First Radio out of the studios of Free Radio Santa Cruz. It comes on live every Thursday at 11 my time. I don't know what time that is Eastern, but you can look it up. But coming up in 25 minutes, we air. It's hosted by Uncle Dennis, if anybody's curious to look it up online. It's called Earth First Radio. It's hosted by an old friend of mine from years and years and years and years ago. I actually started my radio career in the studios of Free Radio Santa Cruz. It's the longest running pirate radio station in America on FM. That's on the air. And they're actually a storefront operation now. The judge, the federal judge in Northern California, has stopped issuing warrants to the FCC because they basically, the judge said the last time they went in, which was several years ago, it's like, look, you can't shut these guys down. They've been on the air for 20 years now. We're not going to give you warrants anymore. So they just operate out in the open as a
That's sweet.
more or less, I guess, tolerated pirate radio station in Santa Cruz. So
That's sad. It took them 20 years to wake up. It took them 20
Yeah.
years
Yeah,
to
the
wake up
FCC
to
is
that
a
fact.
joke.
Like, you couldn't have made that decision at 10, 15. What's is it 20 that makes it that you're legitimate? Like, holy crap.
Right. Right. You know, and it's funny because Free Radio Santa Cruz has quite a history. Like I said, back in the days before the internet, radio was a real powerful tool of transgressive protest. And with Free Radio Santa Cruz, it started very, very small. And I can remember literally pushing, we had this tricycle, a big, like adult-sized tricycle with a metal basket on the back of it. And we would have the entire radio station mounted in this basket on the back of this tricycle with a whip antenna just literally mounted on the side of the tricycle. And we would push this thing, and the sheriffs would be right behind us. We'd be like pushing it through the woods, literally like running from the cops. And the sheriffs would have like dogs and everything, like combing the woods for us. And we're like pushing this radio station, staying on the air too. Like, we're on the air broadcasting, right? You know, with nothing but a cassette recorder and a microphone, and just pushing the station, literally running through the woods. And then for years we had it in a van where we used to drive it all over Santa Cruz and park in a mobile van, and they would chase us around and try to triangulate us and find us. And so it was quite a cat and mouse game for a lot of years. And then, like I said, they just pretty much gave up. At some point, they just gave up trying to shut it down. And so Free Radio Santa Cruz is kind of a community, along with Free Radio Berkeley. They're kind of both sister stations. They kind of hold the whole pirate scene down, at least on the West Coast, but really sort of all in all of America, at least as far as pirate FM radio goes. So anyway, yeah, that's my buddy Uncle Dennis. And if anybody's interested in transgressive environmental news, Uncle Dennis is your man. He doesn't waste any fucking time. His show is a monologue, 30 minutes long. That's it. He goes and he tells you at the beginning. He starts every show with, please get out a pencil and a piece of paper, because this is activist radio, and we want you to take action on the things that I'm about to tell you. And then he just lines it up. And you're talking about like directions to tree sitters so that you can go bring them food. I mean, that's the kind of actionable information that Uncle Dennis gives every week. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, it airs on Anonymous Global Internet Radio live every Thursday at 11 p.m. Central, and then we rebroadcast Uncle Dennis, I think, on Saturdays. Uncle Dennis's show is rebroadcast, but it's broadcast live tonight, coming up in about 20 minutes, for anybody who's interested. Not that
Hey, we do have a lot of
your show.
we do have a lot of things we want to still ask of you, and you have like an incredible story. So I'm not sure how long this other show is going to last, but
30 minutes, and I can come back. I can stay right now. I got 20 minutes. I can keep talking, and then I got to go for 30 and run Dennis's show, and then I can come back even. I'm game for that. And I was talking with you anyway on the Twitter. I mean, if you enjoy my company and all, I don't mind to visit quite often. I think this is a great show, and I love the casual format. And so I if you're interested in having me, I'll make visiting a fairly regular
regular thing.
Yeah, you can come back as a regular guest. Of
Yeah,
course.
we've also been thinking
And,
about
you know, it's-
doing something similar to what
Yeah,
you're
it's-
doing because we're getting censored on some of our media platforms so bad.
all of our media platforms.
Yeah.
Like,
Heavily.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
that's how we
interesting
know
how
we're
you
going
guys
in the
are.
right direction.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting how you guys approach this too. Like I never would have thought of doing it the way you've done it. I'm an old school MP3 shoutcast, icecast broadcaster. You know what I mean? And for me, audio is audio and video is something different. And you guys have sort of squashed audio into video, and that's different. I never would have thought to do this on YouTube. So I don't know. There is a whole other world out there for you guys to explore, and that is just standard MP3 streaming to a shoutcast server radio. I think it might be simpler and easier. I don't know. I just don't know. But you guys have quite a reach, though. The thing is, I noticed that you guys are on with this using this restream thing. You're on a whole shit ton of these video platforms all at once. But like I said, there is another world out there. There is another completely different way to do it, and that's the way we do it over at Anonymous Global Internet Radio, which is just straight up audio streaming with Icecast and Shoutcast.
We
So
do have a
old
problem
school.
on our Periscope. We do have a problem, so we
I don't know
apologize
if
to
we're
the listeners.
I don't know if we're censored or settings locked off, but like on the back end, it looks like I'm hoping we didn't get censored.
Well, it's been
We
weird
lost another
recently. It's
Facebook
they
account,
only
too.
I didn't get booted from Facebook right away this time, but give them a second.
Oh yeah, well,
Last
we lost
time
another account.
I got 3 shares in when we were going over the Zuckerberg stuff. I got 3 shares in before I was locked out and then banned for just the normal Facebook jail.
Yeah, like the regular
30
stuff.
days or 90.
Yeah, it was
Oh, the
not, it was
censorship
30
on
days.
social
It was
media
30
lately
days.
is a whole other topic, man. Come on. I mean, Twitter shadow banning, what the fuck even is that shit?
Well, you know,
mean-
it's so bad. Like if you follow, like I know you follow Julian Assange like me, I can't even see he's not in control of his account now, but I can't even see those tweets unless I look at his shit. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, and
Shadow
half
ban.
of them come up for mine where it says that that it's seen as mature content or something like that. Like all of the anon sites, I'd say there 1 or 2 of their posts comes up with those like warnings, and then you can't get to it. It's just kind of grayed out.
And I think it's algorithmic. I think it's somewhere along the line, these dickheads who run these companies made the choice to calm things down. And the way that they do that is with a set of algorithms. And it's really designed not to eliminate any particular one person's speech, but to calm the entire conversation down. And because they're feared, they're afraid. They're afraid of the power of social media and how it's, I mean, what if, and I'm not saying, but what if social media actually is responsible for Trump getting elected? Now, I'm not saying any one particular person manipulated that and caused it, but what if social media is what fueled it? You know what I'm saying?
I would say
So,
if we're not
and
to
then
that
somebody comes
time
along and
already,
says, yeah.
if
Zuckerberg
we're not
and
to
Obama
that time
bragged about it in
already,
2012.
the next, it was seen as a resource, and it's continued that way. If this presidency, if Trump wasn't elected because of social media in the end, people getting out information, all of that network, not to one side or the other, that doesn't particularly matter. But the power of social media is what got him elected. If it didn't happen this time, it was definitely affected by it. And this next president, guaranteed, will be elected by social media. It won't really matter what they say on corporate, on the corporate TVs and the talking heads and all that. It really won't matter. It'll be the following and the memes and the power that is in social media will elect the next president. I see that as already pretty much happened, but I guarantee this next president will be, either president or not president because of social media. If it works to our benefit, that's great. If we put our support behind people and that becomes overwhelming. But, whether our opponents use it, that's not what I'm making the point of. It's that there is a huge amount of power in social media that if it's not already causing the sway one way or another, it definitely will the next time.
Well, that power may be in some people's hands still, but I'm going to tell you, I wielded a lot of power on social media 5 years ago. I did. And I was able to reach out and punch world leaders in the face with the power of social media. And I can tell you that that weapon is considerably dulled
Yep.
down from what it was. It is not the same sword that I was wielding 5 years ago. And that has been done with algorithms. That is, that the ability of individuals and groups to wield raw power on social media has been seriously blunted with these shadow banning sort of algorithms and the different ways they found to tone it down. They're trying to tone radical speech down. And this is why I'm against the whole censoring of anybody. I mean, I don't want to bring up any one particular group, but I know that a lot of people have been really going after these sort of Nazis and these white supremacists lately and everything. And I'm all about getting in the street and punching one of them in the face. I'll be the first one to sign up. Seriously to God, I will. I love a good barroom fight, and I'm not afraid of a brawl. And I'd love to go in the street and punch a Nazi in the face. I'm sorry, but I mean, if you think I'm a bad person because of that, then okay, I stand judged. But the fact is, I'm against censoring them online for two reasons. One, because it's a double-edged sword. They're going to use those same rules, whatever rule they make, they're going to come back on you to get your radical speech next. And the other thing is, too, it doesn't make strategic sense. If you want to get these cats out in the streets so you can punch them, then you want them to organize online so that you can see what they're doing. How are you going to know where to find them, right? If they make
that's the
secret
point.
meetings,
Yeah.
look at the KKK. Back in the 70s, they used to just have a meeting in some guy's basement, and they say, okay, we're going to go burn crosses in the woods somewhere, and we gather, and they got away with it, right? Because nobody knew. No opposing force could find that out and go there and do anything. But now they organize right out in the open, online, and Discord servers and whatever, right? Why shut that shit down? Why not leave that shit running so you can see what they're going to do next, and then you can go confront them in the streets? And I think punching them actually is very effective. I mean,
Well,
really,
and
to be honest with you, it's
it
more
comes down
effective
to it comes down to in the end freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech keeps the government from stopping you from saying whatever you want. That does not change what public opinion, right, does to you. That's a risk you take. If you want to come out and kill all the Jews, kill all the blacks, kill all the Latinos, whatever you want to cut out and say, right, you're free to come out and say that. The government shouldn't arrest you for that. Now, if it destroys your life because of public opinion, that's not my fault. You took that opportunity.
And that's
that
where
chance,
Anonymous
right?
can be effective. And that's where Anonymous, I think, is most effective. I think that not
definitely,
not taking these websites offline, but in outing these people and ruining
yeah,
their
because I want to
reputations
post.
by doxing.
I want to post exactly what you said. You know what I mean? Like
when you think about it, this is where doxing really takes on a whole new sort of professional color, right? I mean, people will kind of look down their nose at doxers and go, oh, well, what fucking good are you in the movement, right? But this is where doxing can be a very powerful weapon of disclosure to dox these people. I love the people that go out and get the pictures, the photographs from the protests, and then one by one they painstakingly dox these white supremacists, and their story after story you hear of their lives being ruined. They get fired, their wives leave them, all kind of bad shit happens to them when they get outed for this bad behavior and these bad beliefs. So again, I think there is a role for anonymous and hacktivism. I'm just not sure if I agree with the shutting down of actual websites and trying to get their accounts banned from Twitter and everything. I'm just not sure that approach is viable or effective. And again, it's a double-edged sword, because if you insist on making a world where they can't speak, then you also make a world where you're likely to be shut down too. I mean, our speech is pretty radical.
well, and I mean, we've seen that over and over and over again.
Yeah, that happened to what's his name?
Look at this.
What's his name? The guy who was activist on our side and became a Nazi. What was his name? Weave.
Yeah.
Yeah. They ran him off the internet. The hosting companies.
Well, that was
and
again. That's I guess I just sort of weighed my rule down that I don't think that's a good idea. I'm gonna give an exception to that one particular one, because he's such a prick.
he's such a cocksucker
Yeah.
that I really think we've had that one coming, and I really kind of liked that little battle, that little slap down of Weave. But I mean that's the one sort of rare exception. That was sort of cyber war between Weave and some old fags and Anonymous. But I think generally speaking, I think that's wasted effort. I really feel that Antifa really has the right idea. Confront these cats in the streets, and make their life a miserable shithole. And the Anons that are doxing, the Anons that are gathering the data for these white supremacists and doxing them, that's powerful stuff as well. That's powerful work there. But I fear that all radical speech now is being lumped into one big thing, and that they're going to censor us all, basically. And I think if it's a choice between me being allowed to have my radical speech as long as a white supremacist gets to have his, if that's the choice, then I'm okay with him being able to speak as well. You know what I mean? I guess
I feel that it's one of those things as well. If I felt we were losing, maybe I would be on the opposite side of that. But when it comes to that ideology, the use of media, I see that as being a win. We are definitely winning over the white supremacist mindset. In a way that we've never done before. There's outrage every time one of these guys comes out and speaks. That really fills me with some inspiration. There was a time where they marched by the millions down Pennsylvania Avenue, proud to be white supremacists. Now they literally have to hide when they're not in a large group somewhere, and then most of the time those videos come back to bite them too. That's inspiring to me. I'll just say in that one spot for sure, I think that we're killing them. Nobody likes being outed as a white supremacist.
That has to be the approach too, because you're never going to change these people. Anybody who's out there thinking, well, you're going to somehow unite with these cunts, are you serious? There's no common ground between me and a white supremacist. So the only thing that you're left with is you have to find a way, whether it's vigilante within the law or without the law. You have to find a way to disenfranchise these people and remove them from any semblance of power within society, because you're not going to change them and they're not going to change you. That's the key. They think they're right. They believe that they're right. And we believe that we're right. I think, to me, I've stopped thinking about things in terms of right and wrong. I stopped years ago. I think of things in terms of power. And they have power, and we need to take that power from them in the same way that we take power from the government with our actions, the same way we take power away from corporations. We need to apply those same techniques and take power away from these horrible people, because I just think that there's never going to be any common ground. There is no. The United States will never be united. I don't see how it ever can be with this sort of diametric opposition that you've got. I mean, the black people are never going to accept a world where white cops can shoot them in the back. I mean, they're just never going to accept that. And the white people are never going to accept a world where they can't do that. So, 65% of white people. Well, listen, think about this. 65% of white people voted for Donald Trump. That's not a few bad apples. People who have serious critique of white, as I do, and I'm a white person, have serious critique of white privilege and white people in general. I think that's something to think about. People often try to say, well, most white people are good, and there's just a few bad apples. 65% of white people in America voted for Donald Trump. Wrap your mind around that. That means 65% of American white people are misogynist, fucking racist bigots. They have to be, because he wore that on his sleeve. He ran on being that shit.
Well, so would you have preferred criminal Hillary? Was that your choice, or?
No, in fact, if you follow, I want to answer his question, because I like this guy. I hear him every week, and I don't know who you are, man, but I like you a lot, man. And I'm going to answer your question. No, I actually was with Julian on this. I wanted to crush Hillary and get Donald Trump elected. I'm actually worked hard to get Donald Trump elected. How about them apples? And I'm satisfied with the result. You know what the result is? My enemy, the U.S. government, is in total chaos, and it's an Uberus eating itself alive.
That's
Okay,
very,
he's actually eating. The deep state is actually eating itself alive, and we predicted this. If you look in my writings and you look in Julian's writings, 6 months before the election, we both predicted that this would happen, if Donald Trump were to get elected, and then we set to work doing that. The original goal for most of us who decided to take some sort of action for this past election was to get Bernie elected. When we got a hold of the Hillary emails, and I'm not bragging, but me and several people actually had those emails days before they were published. A lot of us worked to help WikiLeaks as analysts, and we all knew, those of us who were in the know ahead of time knew from those emails that Bernie had no chance, and there was no way for the hackers to fix that. An election is a moving train. It's a freight train, and it's moving at speed. Hacking takes time. It takes planning. It takes thought. So there was no way to help Bernie. He was toast. So it immediately became anybody but Hillary, in that milieu, that idea. And the idea, Trump became more palatable to us as we furthered that process. As we went with that idea, Trump became more palatable to us because of the damage that we believed he would do to the internal workings of the federal government. Who is our real enemy? It doesn't matter who's in the chair. The real enemy is the entire U.S. federal government. And they're the ones who want to lock all of us up. They're the ones who want to kill us. And it's personal. So as far as the hackers went, our goal was to get Trump in there because we felt like it would do the most damage to our enemy. And especially in the last week, I'm very satisfied with him attacking the FBI, him attacking the U.S. Justice Department. You know what? I've got no sympathy for Comey. Comey has tried to lock me up for 10 years. Comey has been chasing me for 10 years. I've been running from his FBI. He's my fucking enemy. Obama locked up more hacktivists and more information activists and more whistleblowers than all the previous presidents combined. Of course, we were never on Hillary's side. Come on. The hacktivists that were in the know, that were really working to affect this past election, none of us were on Hillary's side. We were all on the same page. And we did see value in getting Trump elected. I think that the raw division that is exposed in America is necessary. That division needs to come out in the open. Having that division hidden and placated by, the first black president, or with Hillary, it would have been the first woman president, and all the cracks would have been papered over. Everything would have been papered over, and everybody would have been like, everything would have been just the way it was with Obama. Nothing would have changed. This is change, okay? Fighting Nazis in the streets is progress. Because those fucking Nazis always existed. They were always police officers. They were always school teachers. They were always there in our society. Now we're finding that out. Now everybody in America gets to see that, and you can't avoid that. So I think that Trump has peeled off the Band-Aid. He showed the disunity in the United States of America. He showed the dysfunctionality of the federal government. He has exposed the deep state for what it is. I think he's a horrible person. I mean, he's the worst person ever elected president in my lifetime, for sure. But does he suit my agenda? Absolutely. And I think that if Julian could be honest, that's what he would say too. But he's not free to be that honest, because everybody's going to paint him as some sort of Russian collaborator. But I didn't collaborate with any Russians, and I worked to get Trump elected. How about them apples? I'll take the criticism.
Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead. You guys can criticize me now.
Well, no, I never looked at it that way.
Well,
after the Bernie, after Bernie got burned, that was pretty much the only choice you had. You're right. I never really saw any hacktivists or hackers, working for Hillary. That's a good point.
No, there was a plan. And I talk about this in Dark Ops because the plan actually began back in 2010, guys. The idea of election hacking was unique to my crew. And we decided to do it in 2010 as part of Operation Vendetta, which was the anonymous reaction to the U.S. declaring war on us and the 40 raids, the 40 search warrants that were served back in 2010, which was essentially a declaration of war. And the response, anonymous response to that, was Operation Vendetta, which had a public face to it, the usual sort of smashy, go fuck up federal websites kind of face to it, but it had covert parts to it. One part of it was to build a legal team, a team of lawyers who would help to defend anons who got hung up in court. And another part was the Underground Railroad that I talked about in Behind the Mask, which was to help anons escape. And another part of it was the idea to try to wreck the 2012 American election. And we went into that. We actually hacked in. We got into several systems. And in a strange twist, which again, you have to read the book to really appreciate how incredible this story is. But right up until election night, our plan was to wreck the election in 2012. But by wrecking it, what I mean by that is we were going to delete votes at random. We were not going to favor either candidate. I believe it was, who the fuck was it running against? Was it Romney running against Obama in 2012? Who the fuck was the Republican candidate?
Yeah, it
that
was
sounds
Romney.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was Romney. Yeah. And so we weren't going to favor either candidate. We were going to go in and just wipe out votes. And we would then release a press release. The plan would be afterwards we would release a press release giving proof that we had done this and issuing a challenge that how can anybody prove that this election is fair if we can do this so easily to go in there and wipe these votes out, then probably other people also did that. So how does anybody ever know who won? And thus the election is delegitimized, and thus we have struck a blow against the U.S. government. So that was the general strategy for my crew in 2012. This is chapter 1 of Dark Ops. If you're interested in some incredible hacking history, you really got to read Dark Ops. And we got all the way to election night. We planned for a year and a half to hack. We managed to get into Ohio and Florida. And we had also a bunch of machine hacks, like voting machine hacks that we had released out into the wild. And we were encouraging people to go in and do these machine hacks. And so we waited until election night to drop our bomb, to release the virus that we had written into these systems, because we wanted to see if anything interesting happened. So we decided to wait till the very last moment. So we're sitting in an IRC on election night, and the member of our crew who had his foot in the door, whose job was to actually execute these hacks that we had built, came into the IRC and he's like, "Guys, we got a problem." And we're like, "Well, what's the problem?" And he's like, "Well, we're not alone in the systems." And we're like, "What do you mean we're not alone?" And he goes, "Well, there's other hackers in here with us." And like, "Well, can they see us?" And he's like, "No, they can't see us, but I can see them." And he ran a backtrace, and it turned out that the other hackers were hacking directly from the headquarters, the Republican headquarters in Ohio, which that afternoon had been taken over by Karl Rove. Karl Rove had actually taken over the entire Ohio Republican headquarters that day. And that hack was emanating from the basement. Literally, we knew it was literally from the basement of the Ohio Republican headquarters. And anybody who's interested in this story as I'm telling it, I challenge you to stop for a moment, open up your tab, bring up Google or DuckDuckGo, and put into your search term, "Anonymous saves the election for Obama," and see what comes up. You'll be quite surprised. There's still several media articles floating around about this hack. But anyway, so he came in and he said, our guy in the network said, "Yeah, we got a problem. We got these guys in here." So immediately, part of my crew, 1 or 2 members of my crew, wants to kick these guys out because they did have a very viable plan to throw the election. It really looked like what they were about to do would have been enough to throw an electoral college victory for Romney, and which is what they had in mind, because Obama was scheduled to win by a couple million votes. And one of the members of my crew had actually written a white paper several weeks before about this exact thing. He predicted this. He said Karl Rove is going to attempt an electoral college victory And it's mathematically possible by changing only a few votes in hundreds and hundreds of districts. And this is how you could do it. And he showed the mathematical formula, and he released this white paper to us, and we actually released it. We sent it along to the media, this proof of concept that he had. And so he's jumping up and down in the IRC. He's like, see, I told you guys. And of course, none of us listened to him. So we're like, yeah, well, I kind of don't have that white paper here. What was it you told us, you know? And so he's like giving us the rundown. And my crew starts to lean towards the idea, we're going to kick these guys out and save the election for Obama. I'm honest in my book. I was never in favor of it. I'm still not in favor of it. I went along with it because my entire crew, I'm the boss, but my entire crew worked hard for a year and a half to do those hacks. And so it was, you know, I had to go with the consensus. And so I reluctantly agreed. They wanted to put it out underneath the crew flag, and I was like, fuck no. I put my foot down. I was like, that's not going out under my flag. Screw that shit. So they invented a crew called the Protectors of Democracy. We invented it literally right there on the spot, called Protectors of Democracy under the anonymous flag. It was generally it's supposed to be an anonymous crew, but of course it's never been heard from before or after. That was it existed for solely. If you study history, you'll prove that by Googling. But and so we threw them out, and we gathered evidence against them, and we released the entire thing to the media, proving to the media that we had in fact saved the election for Obama. And again, if anybody took the time just now to Google that up, you know I'm telling the truth. You know that there are several media articles still out there floating around about that hack. So how about that? That Obama turned out to be the worst tyrant against hackers, against hacktivists, against anonymous. He targeted us with the worst pogrom ever in political history, and yet we literally put him in power. We saved his re-election.
I mean, that's pretty much exactly what they've done with Assange. You know, when it was the election, everybody was praising him and this and that. Thank you. I think he's a patriot and blah, 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 blah. And then as soon as the election's over, you know, we'd like to lock you away in some secret government prison.
I think that was specifically Jeff Sessions that attacked him. Yeah. Hello?
Well, I've just made an executive decision, guys. I'm going to cancel Uncle Dennis this week. We'll just too many things to do. It's too many things to do at the same time. Run a radio station, be on a show that's on that radio station, and then try to insert a second show into that show. It's too much. So I'm just going
to. I did actually check out your thing about the election, and literally, like the title says, "Did Anonymous stop Rove from stealing the election?"
Yeah,
it's literally an article.
And there's actually even a moment. It's really funny, but in the book I talk about it, and in a couple of the articles they talk about it. But there's actually a moment where an aide, Rove was so sure that his plan was going to work, and I really think it would have. I really think he would have succeeded. That he was already announcing Romney's victory, and then an aide scampers on stage and whispers in his ear, and he starts going spit flying ballistic, like. He just instantly turns fucking purple. Veins come out of his neck, and he starts screaming, "We will win! We will win!" And like he's literally like something really obviously went up his ass sideways. And we were able to point that out to the media to the point where at least a couple of the people who wrote about that hack went back and looked at the video footage and said, "Yeah, you know, there's actually looks like there's a moment where Rove is notified that the hack didn't work." That his people have been thrown out, and that he literally seems to be going ballistic for no reason at all. That it seemed anyway to us that when we threw the hackers out, that he was notified and that he was very, very pissed, and he was on the stage. He was on the stage speaking to the world when that happened. It was quite an exciting little thing. I mean, it was different. Like I said, to this day, I did not vote. I didn't in my crew. My thumbs were down. I did not vote for that. We went in there to do smashy, and I still think we should have gone in there and done smashy. But, out of an abundance of consensus, to my crew who worked really hard, I went with what they wanted to do. And I'm honest about that in the book, that I did not want to save anything for anybody. That wasn't why we did it, and that wasn't why we did the hack. And I to this day, I wish we had not done that.
Okay.
But my point is that the idea of election hacking then took hold. That hack is actually mythological within Anonymous. It's for those who have really studied the deep history of Anonymous, that particular hack is a myth. So it planted in the underground the idea that then grew over 4 years. It produced fruit, and that fruit was a much more concerted effort to insert ourselves as a movement into the 2016 election. And then I talk about this in my article and in my book. I talk about how they then became a juxtaposition because there were Western activists who wanted to interfere in the election, and there were Eastern Ukrainian and Russian hackers, not state-sponsored, who had their own reasons for wanting to fuck up the election. Because let's face it, hacktivists in, say, the Balkans, they got legitimate reason to hate America. Okay, NATO's involvement in the Ukraine, the encirclement of Russia. You got to understand that those hacktivists over there have in their mind just as much legitimate reason to attack America as, say, the Western hacktivists do over, say, Aaron Swartz or the CFAA. So there was just it was a coincidental collision of hacktivists from the East and hacktivists from the West, and Julian provided the sort of strategic leadership, but not directly. He didn't there was no command and control, but Julian's idea of pressing Hillary and his strategy going forward sort of became the strategy. Well, that's what Julian needs to affect that. Let's go get it for him. Let's go get that data. And so that's how the election hacking in 2016 took place. And then the whole Russian bot thing came afterwards. That was an afterthought by the Russians. Sure, did they jump in with their little bot farms afterwards? Yeah, they did. But they were not leading the strategy, and they certainly weren't doing the hacks. I know the hackers who hacked the DNC, and I know the hackers who hacked Petraeus. What was his name? Not Petraeus, but what was the name of the the other dude there, the DNC, but yeah, those were the two main hacks. Okay, it was the DNC hack and the Podesta hack. I know the cats that did it. I wrote about that in my book. I know them, and they are Russian state hackers. They're mostly Ukrainian and Romanian hackers, actually, with a little bit of Russian help. But even Russian hackers have plenty of reason to attack America. They don't need to be state-sponsored to have reason to do that. The same way in America, you have the Jester and you have the whole Patriot hacker thing, and it works the same way. Russia doesn't go after its patriotic hackers, right? So you go, oh well, they're state-sponsored because Russia doesn't go after them. Well, do you see the U.S. government going after the Jester? It's the same, and he was hacking Russia. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. America also protects hackers. If you're hacking for the government's agenda, you're not going to go to jail. You're not going to get a CFAA fee.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make you a state-sponsored hacker. That just means that you're on the right side that your government agrees with. So there are hacktivists in Russia that went after the U.S. and went after the Democratic Party and fucked the election up, but they weren't doing it because they were state-sponsored, and they were doing it for the same reasons we in the West were doing it, and that is we have a common enemy, and that's the U.S. government.
Well, I mean, that's a tactic that they use quite a bit. It's not always what they do specifically, but what they know about and don't do anything about. That they can prevent things from happening that they definitely know about, and then, knowingly do not prevent them. And,
Exactly.
We've seen, those kind of things over and over again. But then, as soon as you stray from being the lapdog, right, they have perfect excuse, when they don't need you anymore, or the administrations change or their ideas change, they'll come and arrest you right away. You'll be like, God, I've been doing this for 20 years for you guys, and now you're calling me an assassin. It's those kind of tricks that they definitely use.
And it's funny because the primary people who were blamed for being Russian state actors and who were blamed for in particular, the DNC hack. Okay, um, they were a cell that, roughly translated, it would have been anonymous Russia. They were a Russian anon cell, and this cell, this particular cell, as I told you earlier, one of their tactics was to hack Russian politicians and then blackmail them and say, look, we're either going to publish your crap, your email spool on our website, or you give us $5,000 so we can continue our hacktivism. And they were quickly rounded up after the election. The election hack actually exposed them enough where the Russian FSB could track them down. It put enough heat on them that the Russians could actually find them. Every single one of them was rounded up with one exception, and he fled to Finland and asked for political asylum and was granted it. And so he's in Finland now and speaks out about this, and I've contacted him. I've tried to raise awareness about his case and talked about it a lot in my book and on my blog. But so this idea that the crew that did the DNC hack was state sponsored is shot down by the fact that the entire crew was promptly rounded up and arrested by Russian authorities in the aftermath of the U.S. election. And part of what got them caught was they did too much. They bit off more than they could swallow, and that got them hung up with the Russian authorities. So it's just the whole Russian hacking thing is bullshit. And if that puts me again on Trump's side, then I guess I am. But whatever, it never happened. The Russians came in afterwards when they saw what was going on, when they saw the direction that was sort of moving with WikiLeaks and like I said, these hacktivists sort of in Julian's wake, both Western hacktivists and Eastern hacktivists. When they saw that very powerful thing happening, they jumped in with the botnets and with all of that to sort of amplify it and whatever, but they're amplifying the truth. Okay, they're amplifying these leaks of Hillary's emails that show her to be a complete criminal cunt. And so even then, I mean, their effect on it wasn't what people think it was. They didn't just hand the election to Trump. All they did was amplify what the hacktivists had already done against Hillary. And yes, that other fellow, I wish I knew his name. I got to learn the names here, but the other fellow that mentioned that the Hillary, why aren't the hacktivists hacking Trump? And that's the reason. No serious hacker right now is going to go after Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. It's simple, because he's working out for us. I mean, he's doing direct nose-to-nose battle with the FBI, with the U.S. Department of Justice, and these are our enemies. These are the people trying to lock us up, not whoever sits in the White House, not whoever sits in Congress. It's the FBI, the U.S. Department of Justice, the CIA, the NSA. These are the people that are the real enemy, you know. And so Donald Trump just is a useful idiot at this point, you know, to us. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's the way the hacktivists that are part of this see it. That's the way the hacktivists that are part of the election hacking saw it, and that's what happened. There was no Russian.
I think it's a truth that it has to be.
There is no dancing fancy bear. Fancy bear doesn't exist. There is no fancy.
No, not at all. But I think that the important thing to know about the election is that, you know, Hillary Clinton was undermined, Trump as well, by the truth and not by lies. You know, the things that the bots were spreading, the memes that they were putting, they weren't spreading lies about Hillary Clinton. She really is corrupt. She really is bought by the banks, right? They weren't lying. The people that were doing it on the Democratic side, they weren't out there lying about Trump being a complete douchebag. He's a complete douchebag.
And those bots,
it's one of the few times where mudslinging.
And those bots were
you mudslinging with the truth. Normally, you mudsling with lies.
Those Russian bots were dropping the bucket too, because a lot of us, and myself included, I mean, I worked a little bit behind the scenes. Like I said, I do things for a lot of people, and WikiLeaks is one of those groups that I do things for. But so, I mean, I did some work behind the scenes, but really in the West, what most of us had to offer was amplifying those leaks, was taking what Julian was publishing and putting it out there as far and wide as we could. And I was one of those people, and I have no small social media footprint. I have a pretty large social media footprint. So I was out there, and tons and tons and tons of other people were out there amplifying those leaks. So it wasn't, the Russian bots were a drop in the bucket compared to what real people were doing to take that information and push it out there and crush Hillary Clinton. Human beings did that. Human beings spread most of that information. Did the Russian bots help a little? Maybe. But it was, again, the whole thing was human fueled and human run, and it wasn't run by Russians. It was the fact that the United States is making enemies out of hackers all around the world, And I mean, in the West, all the hackers in the West hate them because of the CFAA, because of the treatment of Julian. And in the East, in Ukraine and in Balkans and Russia, they have an agenda too. So many people don't understand the Cold War and how it ended, and that's how they don't understand how we got here. But let me tell you how we got here. In the Cold War, there was an unwritten, and this is a big mistake, Russia admits this now, there was an unwritten agreement with Russia when Gorbachev agreed to bring down the Iron Curtain peacefully. And he made this agreement with George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State at the time. And this agreement was that they would bring down the Iron Curtain. They would allow all the satellites, all the Warsaw, what they call the Warsaw Pact nations, the satellite nations like Poland and Romania and all that. They would allow all of them to go free, be sovereign countries. But NATO would not attempt an encroachment. Those nations would act as a buffer zone between what would be Russia proper, just the Russian state now, because all the satellite nations, including Georgia and Ukraine, would be gone. But those satellites would remain a buffer zone. They would remain independent nations, but they would not be absorbed into NATO, and NATO would certainly never try to creep right up to Russia's border. Well, Hillary Clinton, you want to talk about that stupid bitch, okay? And Obama were the architects. They were the fucking architects of ripping that entire agreement up and flushing it down the toilet unilaterally. And Hillary actually came out and said, there is no more spheres of influence. And that day, Russia sailed a fleet into fucking Venezuela just to say, okay, they had never done that before. A Russian ship had never entered South American waters. So they said, okay, you're going to be cunts. They sailed the fleet right into a fucking harbor in Venezuela and said, no more spheres of influence, huh? So how does that work? How does that work for you? How's the foot's on the other, shoes on the other foot? So, and this is a subtle thing that people go, what does this have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything, okay? Because right up until Hillary did that, Russia was supposed to be our buddies. Reagan sold us on that. He said, Russia is going to be an ally now. They're going to be our fucking allies now. We're going to cooperate with security, with counterterrorism. They're going to be a democracy in Europe, just like all the rest, and they're going to be our buddies. And for a long time, that was the deal. All throughout the Reagan, the end of the Reagan years, the Bush years, that was the deal. Russia was our pals. They were our buddies, okay? And then Hillary and Obama came along, and for whatever reason was in their fucking heads, I don't know what they were thinking, but they took that whole unwritten, unspoken agreement that kept the whole peace, and literally caused the downfall of the Iron Curtain, was that agreement between Shultz and Gorbachev, okay? And they ripped it up and immediately started absorbing nations into NATO. Until right now, Russia is completely encircled. If you look on a map and see where all the NATO bases are, and look at the map of Russia, Russia is literally encircled by hostile forces. Now, if Russia were to start building bases in Canada and Mexico, okay, right along the Canadian border too, okay, and right along the Mexican border, and started to encircle America, how do you think fucking America would react? Okay, they would blow the fuck out of everything. That's what they would do. Okay, they would never tolerate that kind of encirclement. So how is it that Russia is now supposed to tolerate the situation that they find themselves in? So what Trump wanted to do, in his sort of clumsy, half illiterate, uneducated way, was to roll that back, was to undo that. So when he talked about having better relations with Russia, in a sense, he was on the right track. Okay. We do need to find a way to undo the damage that Hillary and Obama did to the Russian United States relationship. Because if you, even people in Putin's party, if you talk to them, they don't want to be enemies with the United States. You know what they want? They want respectable relationship and open trade because they know how much money they can make by trading with the United States of America. So they want to be our friends. Now, Russia does not want this adversarial relationship, but they also have a problem, and that's those NATO bases literally kilometers away from their border, and just they're encircled. At this point, they feel like they're encircled, they're under siege. And I just think that's a shame. I think that's a shame because I think, you know, George Shultz was a piece of shit, but the one thing he did right was that agreement with Gorbachev to bring down that Iron Curtain. It ended the Cold War as peacefully as you could possibly imagine. I mean, there were violent uprisings here and there, but it was a relatively peaceful transition to end that situation, that Cold War, that Soviet Union. And I think I just don't understand why Hillary and Obama took that direction, that sort of adversarial approach to Russia, and we're living with that legacy now. And you know, Russia is capable of doing far more than just a bunch of robots and social engineering and social media stuff. If they wanted to, they could turn the lights out in the United States. They could turn the internet off. They can do any number of things at the blink of an eye. If they really wanted to wage cyber war against the United States would be fucked. Okay, they'd be in big fucking trouble. So, you know, that's not what Russia is about. And I think we need a new approach to looking at what motivates Russian government, what motivates Russian hacktivists, and we need to put a more real face on this Russian boogeyman because. I think it's a shame. I think it's one thing to make enemies out of a country like China or North Korea, which are clearly evil, rotten fucking dictatorships. But you know, Russia is a budding democracy. They are a struggling democracy. I don't see there's really no reason for us to be enemies with Russia. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on Russian election hacking. And I've offered to testify to Congress in exchange for a pardon. I'll come home and I'll testify to everything I know, including my own crimes. I'll testify to how me and my crew hacked in and what we found. And I think it would be very enlightening to the president. I think it would be very enlightening to Congress to hear my testimony. And I've offered to return home in exchange for immunity and a pardon. I'll set everybody straight on exactly what happened. I mean, I know all the actors, and I was involved.
Yeah, and now like, not to downplay anything the Russians would do, or like a crew in like St. Petersburg or something, but if you have these government targets, then you already know that there are hundreds of crews interested in gaining knowledge from these targets. So for the Americans to like say that it's just Russia trying to mess with elections, yeah, that's just not true.
I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. U.S. elections are the single most target-rich attack surface in the world of black hat hacking, period.
Of course.
Period.
Of course.
A period. And I predicted this. You know, a year before the American election in 2015, I said that the American election is going to get ripped to shreds this year. They made it so ridiculous. They made the players were so caricaturic and ridiculous. And then to have the head of the Homeland Security come out and say that the American election was unhackable. It just, the whole thing, just the challenge, the throwing down of the gauntlet and the ridiculousness of it, painted a target so big on the American election that there wasn't a black hat hacker alive who wasn't going to try. It was just a shit show of hacking, And they didn't report 99% of the election hacks that actually happened in 2016. Never saw the light of day. They were never reported. They were never made it into the news. You know, but there were thousands and thousands of individual attacks. Simply because, like I said, it was a feeding frenzy. There are some hackers out there in the black hat community that don't give a shit about politics, believe it or not. They just fucking hack whatever happens to be the flavor of the day. Okay, so if it's Israel and everybody's like jumping on that bandwagon, then they're going to go fucking hack Israel. But if it's America and everybody's talking about the election, then they're going to go hack that. And so you've got a whole segment, a whole swath of the crypto anarchy underground that really are just everything is a target opportunity. They just don't give a shit. They're nihilists. Um, and I predict that this next election is going to be the worst yet, because now the idea has really matured. It went from 2012, where it really was an invention of my crew. And then, like I said, because of the mythologicalness of that particular hack, it grew to 2016 and the result we saw then. And now they've made such a big deal out of it. They've gone to such lengths to blame it on somebody who didn't do it. You can just bet your bippy that this next one that comes along, it's going to be literally every hacker in the world is going to take a shot. Why not? You know what I mean? Try to get some street cred. Try to, like you said, learn something. Try to learn something about the systems and how they're
Yeah.
put together. You know, many people hack out of just pure curiosity. But again, they too are hackers of opportunity. Their curiosity will go with the flavor of the day. So they will become curious about elections because everybody else is doing that. So it's really kind of like, it's like a flock of birds, you know what I mean? Where you have the birds and they're just all sort of going along in a random sort of way, but then all of a sudden one bird takes off in a particular direction and they all go, they all follow, you know what I mean? And that's a lot of what the Hacking Underground, that's sort of a great description, if you will, of the Hacking Underground. And so this next election is going to be the worst one yet. It's just going to be so fucked up that I really think people should be talking about dissolving the union. I'd like to see more people talking about the Cal exit movement, which if you look on Twitter, you can
it's
find
becoming more apparent.
some good Twitter handles about Cal exit. California,
Mm.
more than any other state, has a lot to lose from the Electoral College. America has never quite grasped the concept that democracy begins with the very central principle of one person, one vote. They've never gotten that, because even in the original Constitution, where they had black people were 2/3 of a human, you know what I mean? So they counted as far as representation only for 2/3 of a human. And then now we've got the Electoral College, where essentially a person in Kansas gets 1.25% of a vote, and people in California get 0.75% of a vote. That's what the Electoral College does. Is it takes people in California or New England, and that's why there's also a Nexit. If you want to look it up, there's a New England exit. They call it Nexit movement as well, to take all of New England as one piece, one chunk, one country, if you will, and secede. And those were the two places. It's not surprising that California and New England would rise up like that, because those were the two places that were the most disenfranchised by the Electoral College. And essentially it weights votes nationally, so that people in the Midwest get, like I said, about 1 1/4 votes, and people in populous coastal areas like New England or California end up with about 3/4 of a vote. And that's not one person, one vote. It's just not. And if it were, Hillary would be president right now, because she got, 2 million more votes than Trump. So I think that the first lesson in American democracy has to begin with a discussion about that, and you don't ever hear anybody talking about it. It's just oblivious, as if America is this perfect democracy. But it can't be anything like a democracy with something like the Electoral College. It just really can't. So until you face that fact, until you go with a one person, one vote, popularly elected president, then it's just all some sort of weird game. It's all some sort of weird mathematical game. And that's why it can be gamed so easily. That's why the Karl Rove hack would have succeeded. And that's why these Electoral College victories are so easy for the Republicans to gain. It's really the only way they get elected anymore, is these Electoral College victories. And the reason that they're able to do that, the reason they're able to pull it off, is because you only have to manipulate, either legitimately or illegitimately, you only have to manipulate a few votes across the thousands of districts to be able to make a difference and get elected by way of the Electoral College. And using my buddy's system that he invented for hacking, a legitimate campaign could actually figure it out and possibly apply it. And I heard that that's what Trump did. Is essentially they used that same sort of principle, mathematical principle, But instead of doing it with hacking, they actually would like make phone calls to those districts and try to just manipulate those districts more directly, more hands on, like sort of through the front end. But either way, it can lead to victory in the electoral college. I think that mechanism should not exist. So I think the conversation has to begin there, and until you have that conversation, you have a failed republic that has enslaved 50 states, 100 some odd sovereign tribes, for no good reason at all. I don't see the reason why the government even exists. Trump shuts it down on a regular basis, and your life still goes on, right? You still go to work. The sky doesn't fall. The electricity doesn't turn off. I mean, the garbage still gets picked up. So, and that's all without a federal government for days and weeks on end. So why not just not turn it back on? Like the next time it shuts down, just don't turn it back on. What would happen? I mean, I think that's where you're heading. That's the solution you're heading, and I think we can get there. I think we can do something like that. I think if Kansas and Wisconsin and Idaho are so into Donald Trump, then maybe they should be their own country. And then they can elect whoever the fuck they want, and they won't need an electoral college to force their choices on everybody else. And likewise, the East Coast can have all the fucking libtards they want, and to be president, and that's who they would elect. They would elect Clintons and fucking other. To me, I'm an anarchist. They're all fucking cunts as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't elect any of them. But I think that division is always the best way. I think federalism is another word for imperialism. I think federalism is imperialism in disguise. It's why I'm glad that the UK left the European Union. It's why I'm in favor of the European Union just dissolving, because I think as an anarchist, smaller is always better. Power should always be lessened, not greater.
Yeah, that was just another layer of government to overlay everything else, as if you didn't have enough
Which is
already.
what I say the United States of America is, which is what I claim the United States of America is. You have 50 sovereign states perfectly capable of governing themselves, and hundreds of sovereign tribes, okay, who for no good reason at all have been absorbed into this massive fucking empire that they're not even allowed to leave. At least in the EU, at least there's Article 50. But Article 50 doesn't exist in the United States of America, which has to change, because you cannot force, like Spain is trying to do with Catalonia, you cannot force people to remain inside of a country. That is just, it goes against everything that we consider free and civilized in this world. People have a right to self-determination. If the state of California does not want to be a part of the United States of America, it should not need a constitutional amendment to do that. They should just need to vote, and that's it. They leave. Period.
Well, yeah,
that's what the UK did.
Well, I mean, in the Constitution, there are provisions for secession, but they
right, but
you saw how they enforced them the last time in the last Civil War. They don't. It's all about the Union. Now they don't care about states' rights.
The thing about the Constitution is it requires the same thing that Spain requires with Catalonia. It requires the whole rest of the country to validate the exit. So in other words, in order for a state now under the Constitution to leave the Union, it would require a constitutional amendment. Every other state would have to vote yes, or I guess a supermajority. A supermajority of the states would have to vote yes.
And I mean, in actuality, even then, they would most likely send in the military and hold it by force. I mean, that they will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know how that would play out, to be honest with you. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, if it came, I actually made a promise years ago on Twitter, and I'll keep the promise. But if there actually ever is a viable armed secessionist movement in the United States, I'll be back. I'll come back. I'll come back and I'll pick up a gun. The chance to actually fight with a gun against the United States government is something I would die to be able to do. That's how much I hate the U.S. government. So if a viable armed secessionist movement, like some sort of civil war, actually developed in the U.S., I'd return.
There is an echo going on, guys.
Yeah, I think it's from Terrence.
I'm sure.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
It's somebody without headphones. My voice is coming out of somebody's speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah, both me and Tyler are muted.
Oh,
and I'm on.
oh, sorry,
I'm
I
on
was talking. It's you,
headset.
Terrence.
That sounds like it's him.
Me.
Yeah, you're better now. I don't know what you just did. Oh no, it's there. It's there again.
Yeah, like maybe the NSA's recording machine only can record like 20-30 minutes at a time, so they have to.
Well, actually, it was I think it was Tor who mentioned that the other day on his Twitter that his internet every time he takes on like he's taking on I guess the case of Akron 420 or he's involved with it, but his internet always slows down and he goes, can't they get better software like that won't slow my internet so down so much so when they monitor me.
Yeah, and I think some of it has to do with we've got like more than one organization monitoring us, and it would like I said it before. Can you guys just all use one computer? Like, do you have to each have your own supercomputer to do it?
Or maybe just open up a Dropbox and we can just drop the shows in every week afterwards, and they can listen to them like on the download.
Shit, man, I'd give it to you. You can like it's not like anything that.
What the fuck? The fuck just happened?
Oh,
that was weird. I just got censored on Google on the back end.
Oh, come on,
You're right with the echo.
Yeah. Come on,
Double
Google.
done.
I know you want to be like the analyst that's sitting there, right? Like, come on. I know you're on our side to begin with. Just help us out a little bit here.
Well, it's Zuckerberg's Filipino 10,000 man army over there. Going through your shit.
Yeah, come on. Like,
can I give a shout out just real quick, guys? I just want to say this. If anybody is actually tuned in to Anonymous Global Internet Radio tonight for Uncle Dennis's show, you have my apologies. Uncle Dennis will air next week right on time, and I'll download his archive show and play it a lot this week, so to make up for it. So just follow the Twitter and we'll reschedule Uncle Dennis. And I apologize.
Yeah, we got caught up in some good conversation.
Yeah, it's too much fun. Too much fun.
I mean, were we able to talk about the pullout of the peace talks with North Korea at all today?
I haven't spoken about it.
I know I keep on getting.
I have to side with Trump on this one. I mean, I can't understand why everybody is so shitty about him wanting to go over there and talk to this guy. I mean, I'd go talk to him.
Well, no, he pulled out of the agreement. He pulled out of the agreement today. He's not going to talk to them.
I know, and I think that's a shame, and I think he did it under pressure. I believe he did it under pressure because there are so many people in the military and in the diplomatic spheres of the government who were very much against him doing that.
Which is the things that I would really like him to be an asshole about, to say, look, this doesn't work. I'm a maverick. I'm doing my own thing. I'm going to go and talk to him because that's the only way to get anything done. It does really disappoint me, the things that he caves on.
I think so too. I really do. I mean, I think that I'm hoping he doesn't cave on this recent resurgence of his against the FBI and against the U.S. Justice Department. I have an interesting project I've been working on. I guess I'll leak it a little bit here and give you guys some exclusive material. But you all know that my next book comes out on July 4th. But I also have a fourth book in the works and tentative date set to publish it on November 5th of this year. And the title of the book is called The American Gestapo. And it's the subtitle is The True History and Purpose of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And in that book, I explore the earliest history of the FBI and its evolution, and how I pay particular attention to the debates in Congress when the president at the time was trying to push the agenda of forming the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And there were a great many famous congressmen and statesmen who said, no, this is a very bad idea to have a national police force. We're not Canada. We're not, we should not have this. We don't need this. It's gonna go south on us. It's gonna become a political police force. Everything that the FBI has become, every failure of the FBI was predicted by congressmen who fought vehemently against the formation of it in the first place. And in fact, it was certain that the FBI was not going to pass Congress, that it was not going to be created. And so the president used what's known as, at the president at the time who wanted the FBI to be in, to exist, used what's known as a recess declaration. He declared during a recess of Congress that the FBI existed. And so he brought it into existence as a sort of a loophole around Congress. And when Congress came back from the recess, it was already kind of a done deal. It was already a thing, and it had a momentum of its own, and it became impossible to stop this thing called the FBI. And the point of the early chapters of my book, exploring that with the FBI, is that there was a time when the FBI didn't exist, and the country got along just fine, and that the fact that the FBI existed is a contested thing. That it wasn't just an automatic thing, that everybody wasn't in favor of it at the time, and that maybe we need to take a look at that again. Maybe we need to take a look at, maybe we just don't need this agency at all.
Well, I mean, we're starting to ask that same question about a few of these agencies. I mean, the FBI, the CIA, involvement of just horrible things overseas, the NSA spying program. We start asking, why are we funding these people that do nothing but oppress us? That murder people overseas, that deal drugs and guns. Like, what exactly is your purpose here?
Well, they were created unconstitutionally. That was the problem, even for, a right winger or a constitutionalist like me is that you created the problem when you went against the founding documents and the founding beliefs, and now you see it. You see what it leads to.
Exactly. Like I said, it was a loophole. The FBI came into existence because of that exact sort of abuse of power. Recess appointments and recess decrees were designed to be an emergency measure. They were designed to give the president power to act if there was a national crisis and Congress was in recess. That's understandable. I can understand why such a power should exist, but it wasn't designed to thwart the will of Congress when it was clearly going against this idea of in this case, creating this thing called the FBI. Congress was clearly going to shoot it down. So the president used that power to thwart that oversight, to thwart that democratic process. And that's where you run into problems. And
well, I mean, that's
in the process, as my book will explore in November, in the process of doing that, they created this huge problem. The FBI is now a weight of its own. It's got momentum of its own. It's a given fact of life that people feel like you couldn't even live without this thing called the FBI. But the fact of the matter is they catch very few criminals. It's mostly been used as a mechanism of political control. It was always designed to be a mechanism of political control within America. Initially because of McCarthyism and the whole Red Scare. It really ties in with that. So right off the bat, the FBI was used in witch hunt.
We see now the people that they oppress.
Young people don't really have a good understanding of McCarthyism and how bad that whole thing was. But man, all they had to do is slip a Communist Party card inside your wallet, or drop one on the ground, or plant one in your house, and you were done. You were done. If you were officially labeled as a communist, you were fucking screwed.
A communist, a black civil rights leader, gay. I mean, they had quite a long list of things that's what happens with all of these agencies. It never stops. It's got mission creep. There's always one more group of people that we need to have this organization to fight. But you know,
Which
you
is
ask
why a
yourself,
national police force is a bad idea because it can't be controlled. Policing should always be done at the most local level possible because those are the cops that live next door to you. Okay. And so you can get in their face and go, hey, you need to chill your fucking shit. You know what I mean? You can control that shit. Okay.
yeah,
But
damn
you
it,
can't
Bill, knock it
control
off.
You can't control this. You can't control this. You can't have any effect on this massive, empire-wide police force, and that's why it was,
But now they've got use of
wiser heads from the
mercenaries
very
against
beginning
this as
fought against
well.
that.
So I mean, inside of our police forces, they're hiring mercenary groups, places like Tiger Swan and all of that, to infiltrate our police stations and use them as their own personal armies.
Exactly.
Well, it's COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO never went away. They've expanded. They're everywhere.
And the FBI was essentially created to be the ultimate COINTELPRO fucking agency. I mean, that's the whole point of my book in November, the American Gestapo. And again, this is completely unannounced. I'm dropping this guy here on you guys' show. I've never
exclusive on Anonymous Fights Back.
Yeah, but it's going to be quite I think it's going to be a real earth-shattering book. I mean, I'm kind of tired. I was telling my sister the other day too. I'm really tired. 3 books in of writing about myself. It's getting kind of old, to be honest with you. I think the 3rd book needs to happen to finish the story for everybody. But I really am anxious for this 4th book, this book about the FBI, because it's the first chance I've had to sort of step outside that role of storyteller and step into more of a sort of a journalistic and a political role. And so I think it's going to be a good book. And like I said, it's going to explore the real nitty-gritty detail of how, what the debates were to form the FBI, what the agendas were, what the original purpose of the FBI, was, and then go from there to really delve into the many crimes, with a particular focus on political crimes that the FBI has committed, their political interventions that the FBI has made throughout its history. And then to sum the book up with the challenge that, do we really need this agency? It didn't always exist. The world didn't end when it didn't exist. And so maybe we can do without it, and maybe we need to go back to, something different. In the old days, there were far less prosecutions on a federal level, and the reason was because every federal prosecutor, in order to prosecute you for a crime, had to go out and hire an investigator, just for you. And so it made the government, it was expensive for a federal prosecution to take place. It was onerous on the part of the federal government. It took a lot of work on their part to make it happen. And so as a consequence, they had to really think about who they wanted to prosecute and why. And now with this federal agency at the prosecutor's disposal, they can prosecute tens of thousands of people simultaneously, and it's dirt cheap, and really easy to do. And they can fold all the political shit into those prosecutions to sort of obfuscate what their purpose really is. So anyway, that's what my book about the FBI will explore, and hopefully it will be yet another punch in the face that I've given the FBI so many over the years. I mean, this radio show, being on your show. I mean, here I'm a fucking fugitive, and I'm talking on your show. I got to be the first fugitive in American history to be like a radio star. So.
yeah, I think that's
I mean, what the fuck?
What was his name? Dr. John Paul Pierre wrote a book on how to make drugs while he arrested. I don't know. I think this is the first 2.
Yeah. Every hacker in history has always had to wait until he got out of prison before he could, write his books and tell his story. Man, I'm publishing books like crazy, and I haven't even been caught yet. The FBI does not always get their man. Yeah, exactly.
No. What charges are you still facing, or were you running from when this bike trip occurred and your exodus out of Canada?
Well, that's 2 different questions. So let me answer the first one. The first, what started all this was a single set of CFAA charges, remarkably similar case to the Akron, Ohio, Phoenix 420 fellow. It was a government website. It was a county website, actually. And the issue why we organized and perpetrated the DDoS on that county web server was it was a homeless issue, specifically the right to, if you are without a domicile, it's my belief that you have a right to sleep somewhere. And if the government is not going to provide you with easy access to healthy, secure shelter, then you got a right to just sleep in the park. I mean, that's fucking life. I mean, that, sleeping is a natural function that's going to happen whether you like it or not. It's like shitting or peeing. Okay, you can try to hold your pee as long as you want. I'm doing it right now because I've been on the air for 3 hours, but eventually you're going to pop. Okay, so sleeping is the same way. It's a natural function that's going to happen whether you like it or not. And so making laws like they did in this case in Santa Cruz County, but they've done it everywhere, Orlando, all over the country. They make these hideous laws that say you literally can't sleep anywhere in public. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous law.
They try to make everything that's an essential for human life illegal, and that's
well, in
where it
Santa
goes
Cruz
on.
County,
Like,
they've taken it to extreme. They've taken it to extremes. Let me describe for you some of the situation that the homeless people still face in Santa Cruz County and that they were facing during the protests. For instance, there's a law about sitting on park benches. You have 1 hour to sit on a park bench, and that's it. The police actually, literally, will walk by a homeless person and they'll mark down in their notepad, 3:39 p.m. Joe, homeless guy sitting on bench. If they come back an hour and 10 minutes later, you're gonna get a ticket. I'm not even fucking shitting you. You're gonna get a ticket.
That's ridiculous.
So you're a homeless guy now. No, yeah. Now listen to this one. This is the one that kicked off the protests. So they make the sleeping law. Okay. The judges decide that they don't like this, so they're gonna start helping. So the judges start throwing out the cases if you just go into court and say, I wasn't asleep, I was faking it. Okay, so this happens. So a bunch of cases start getting thrown out. So what does the city council and the county council do? They go back into session and they say, okay, we're gonna make a new law. It's now against the law to cover yourself with a blanket during the hours of 11 p.m. to 6 p.m. anywhere in public, asleep or awake.
What?
So now, yes, I swear to you God, it's called the blanket law. There's actually a series of protests where people went and laid in the streets and covered themselves with blankets. Just
like,
to
who
get
comes up with this shit? Like, what kind of person do you have to be to come up with that?
Well, Santa Cruz has really been a leader in coming up with these gentrification laws. They've really sort of tried to push the envelope with this, and so that was the milieu to answer the fellow's question about what started this all and how it all began. That was the milieu. They were on the street, they were on the ground protests. Various occupations of the courthouse and the city hall were going on, and it was also happening at the exact same time that the Operation Payback attacks were happening. So I'm on the ground. I'm in Santa Cruz. I'm a homeless guy. Nobody knows I'm an anon. Nobody knows that I'm also spending my evenings in the coffee house attacking MasterCard. They know me just as a local protester protesting these issues in Santa Cruz. So I just got a wild hair one day and I said, hey, I told a bunch of people, well, just like I'm talking to you guys now, I said, there's a big problem here. And they were like, well, let's go fucking DDoS some shit. Let's go raise some shit up. So we did. And that's basically how those attacks, a series of attacks evolved on the Santa Cruz County servers. And they pretty much laid the entire thing at my feet, which is probably true. I mean, I came up with the idea. I mean, I guess organizing a protest is conspiracy from their point of view, but they're right in that sense. As far as the conspiracy charge goes, it's I did organize it and participated in it. So what began it all was very much like Akron 420. It was very much a civil rights action, and it was an online action, DDoS against they tend to take particular exception if it's a government website, and so in this case they went kind of ballistic because it was a county website, and that's what caught me in the original
charge. How dare you stand up for homeless people? The worst crime imaginable.
Well, it became a pattern, and the next set of indictments that came, which came after this, which came after I left even the United States, involved Orlando. I don't know how many of you remember Operation Orlando which involved Food Not Bombs in Orlando. They were feeding people in the park, and they were getting arrested for it.
Yeah, I remember
Well,
that.
it turns out that well, I'm the one who started it, and the reason I started it was because Keith McHenry is an old friend of mine. I remember Food Not Bombs when it wasn't a global movement. It was Keith McHenry with a grocery basket parked in Golden Gate Park across from the McDonald's with a cardboard sign wired to it that said "Food Not Bombs" in magic marker. That was Food Not Bombs. And I would help him. I would go down there and serve food with him. And then we would see the cops coming, and we'd push this fucking cart as fast as we could through the park, running like with nothing but a 5-gallon bucket of soup in it. That's it, and a bag of bread, you know. And we'd be pushing this thing, and then they catch us and arrest us. And it was called, believe it or not, it actually had a name. It went on for 4 years, and it was called the Soup Wars in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. And that is where Food Not Bombs came from. And I was there. I was there in the park with Keith McHenry. We were both kids back then. And from that, a global movement was born out of Keith's idea. It was Keith's idea. And so when he went as an old man to Orlando to get arrested with his people, that's when I stepped in. That's when I brought Anonymous in, and Op Orlando began, because they locked Keith up for 14 days for feeding people in the park. And you know, we caused millions and millions of dollars worth to Orlando. So that's the next set of indictments that I caught, was from the Orlando attacks. And I don't know what else they have on me. They have several of my computers, so they could have other indictments, but almost certainly there's a couple of indictments out of Orlando. We're pretty certain. My legal team's pretty certain that I face indictment for the attacks in Orlando. And again, it was for homeless people. It was for street people. It's stupid. It's, you know, they shouldn't even be doing shit like that to begin with. Why should the richest city in the world, the entertainment capital of America, be fucking against homeless people getting some food in a park? You know what I mean? I mean, you're not out there feeding them. Why should you care? It's not coming out of your pocket. Somebody else is out there feeding them. Why should you give a shit about that? So that's, you know.
I think the legality, I think the way that they were wording it in Florida was that the people that were feeding, it was ridiculous. They said that the people that were supposed to feed the homeless were supposed to get all these certificates to make sure that the food was sanitary. And I'm like, okay.
Except it's a free speech issue. It always is, because listen to me. If it were nuns, if it were Catholic nuns, and they do it all the time, if the Catholic Church were out in that park fucking serving them sandwiches, nobody would have said a word.
Exactly.
It's because it was Food Not Bombs giving the soup out. It's the message that comes with the food. It always is about that shit. And that's why they go after Food Not Bombs and not these churches and these other organizations that routinely hand out food without a permit. They routinely do it. People are doing it every day. But it's because Food Not Bombs attached a message to their fucking thing that they were doing, and that's what they want to shut down. It's always comes back to speech. Always does.
It's a permitted caste system. Certain people get to do things a lot of other people don't get to. It's just obvious.
You know what I mean?
It's a crony capitalist caste system.
Yep. And it's one of the reasons during Orlando people didn't get it. People didn't understand, but we targeted the Catholic Church in Orlando. We targeted the Archdiocese. And that was part of the reason, because number one, they wouldn't support. They wouldn't come out in favor of the right to feed people. And even though they advantaged themselves of that very right to do their own charity work. And so because they wouldn't come out in favor, we said, fuck it, we shut them down. And so, yeah, I think we probably caught quite a few indictments. Those who are familiar with Operation Orlando, it was a pretty brutal op. I mean, we did millions of dollars worth of damage in just a couple of weeks. And we won. I mean, Food Not Bombs can now serve openly in the city of Orlando. So it was an important victory. But, you know, I guess I'll go to jail for it if I'm ever caught. But I'm okay with that. You know, really, to be honest with you. Catch me if you can, but if that's what I'm going down for, is standing up for people with no voice. I mean, I've always been into homeless issues because I think that nobody has less of a voice in our society than them. They are the most disenfranchised in a laissez-faire capitalistic society. So, to me, standing up for them is like really going right to the very bottom of the food chain and standing up to the weakest. And it's so despicable to live in such a rich society that you won't even let some guy sleep on a patch of grass in the park. Are you fucking serious that you can't live with that? When you're gonna go home to your fancy house and your 3.2 cars and your 4.2 kids and all that fucking shit, and you can't fucking live with the fact that some guy's gonna sleep in the park? I mean, fuck you. To be
Yeah,
honest,
I think
I'd rather
Colorado
burn your
was
house to the ground.
doing something even worse. I think it was in Denver where they were arresting people that had a tent. You hear about that?
Yeah, exactly. Trying to survive.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? You know where I come from in the state of Maine, they actually have a law that says I can break into an empty house to survive during a blizzard. Like I'm actually entitled
Yeah,
to
Chicago's the
break
same
in.
way. I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah, to save my life, I can break into mostly it's hunting lodges. Like people have often used it where if you get trapped in the woods, you can go in somebody else's hunting lodge, and it's legal. And so I don't know. It's just foolish the laws that people try to pass in America, and I just don't understand. Leave the homeless people alone. The thing is, American capitalism doesn't want to help the homeless. I get that. You know what I mean? I've never been an advocate like we should. I was never a homeless advocate. I was never out there. Hey, you should spend more money on them and shit like that. You know why? Because I know nobody gives a fuck. But just leave them alone. They can survive. Most of them can figure out a way to survive on their own. They're pretty crafty. You know what I mean? They get a backpack, they get a routine, and they make a life for themselves on the streets. Just leave them the fuck alone. You know? I'm not telling anybody to give them money. I'm not telling anybody to give them homes. I know that shit ain't going to happen in America. America don't give a fuck. But leave them alone. You will leave them the fuck alone. That's the thing with me. And I will always keep coming back to that. The one issue that will drag me back into cyber activism again and again is that issue when I hear them fucking with homeless people in America. It infuriates me.
Well, you heard about what
I mean,
happened
so
in like
what?
Orange County where the judge got involved trying to do a good deed, got all the people off the river, the Santa Ana River Trail, and then put them all in hotels. And now it's turned into this fucking shit show where they didn't have a plan after they put them in the hotels, and the eviction notices are coming, and they don't want anybody on the river. So it's like, well, you just fucked.
Well, they always do that. Santa
Yeah,
Cruz tried for years. They tried to make peace with us because this has been going on for decades in Santa Cruz. They tried to make peace with us by making an official homeless camp. So they built this big fucking place, and then so now you're still not allowed to sleep anywhere in Santa Cruz, but you've got to go to this fucking place. And so, of course, it turned into a shit show. It turned into a den of drugs, a den of crime. Girls and children were raped. I mean, it was fucking a horror show. And that's because people don't want to all live together. People form affinity groups. So this is how homeless people survive. They form individual groups of affinity to protect themselves and to protect their own little family and their own little community. And sometimes it can grow quite big. Sometimes it becomes almost tribal, but but it works. You can't just jam, and that's why shelters don't work, because you have everybody all crammed into one space. Well, everybody doesn't like or want to be with everybody, you know? And so the natural approach is the best way. If you're going to have people living without a roof, then let them live whatever the fuck they want, and they'll build their little tent cities on the river bottoms and in the woods and whatever, and just let it be, because and the thing is, people go, well, why should we tolerate that? Because you got no choice. It's a capitalistic society. You're going to have fucking poor people. Period. A capitalistic society can't work without poor people. Money is worth nothing if everybody's got it.
yeah.
What makes money worth something is that people don't have it. Okay, so in a capitalistic society, you accept poverty as not only endemic, but as an integral component of the system. So if that's the case, then you just got to leave people alone. You've got to let people deal with that, however it is they're going to deal with that. And again, like I said, I'm not an advocate. I'm not saying people should have homes. I'm not saying I've never been a homeless advocate. I'm a homeless hacker because I think that it's wrong to fuck with them. Just leave them alone and let them survive, their own way. They'll find their own way. And, I don't know. That's my thing. It's always been pretty simple. It's never been about socialism or about anything. It's just been about just leave people alone and let people live their lives, And I think someday they got a big surprise coming, because someday somebody's going to come along and realize that all those homeless people are a fucking army and give them guns. You know, that's what, you know, I to be honest with you, I was tempted during my time in the homeless movement, you know, to just fucking start arming them. I mean, when I see how badly they're treated, and it's like, you know, if you just fed them and gave them a gun, you'd have a fucking army of millions. So if I were people, I would watch out how you treat them, because someday somebody's going to bring them all together, organize them all into one movement, and you know, you could be really in a world of shit. Well, anyway, guys, do you got to end your show or what?
I don't know, John. Are you still here?
I think we got
When
like
do you end it at 1?
50 minutes left. I think.
20.
Sometimes we end it.
50?
We ended at 3.5
50?
hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can hang at 50. I can hang 50 more minutes. I can do it.
Oh, now you still had to get back to like how those charges, you know, went back to you leaving and the exodus and everything.
Okay, sure. So yeah, they leveled the charges for the attack. And what happened was, after the attack, there ensued a period of 9 months where everything became really weird and surreal, because for 9 months, Commander X became this big deal, but nobody knew who I was. It was really cool. I would go into IRCs and listen to arguments, and some people would be like, X is a girl. That was one that I always got a kick out of, because you know, I would be honored to be a girl. I mean, I think the women are smarter, and I think we need more female hackers. But I wasn't, and some people would say the one that was most flattering was people would say I had to be a crew because no one person could do the amount of shit that X does. And so the theories were all over the place. And HB Gary happened during that period of time when Ben DeVries in San Francisco was accused of being Commander X. And I had to actually go to his defense. I had to actually give interviews to journalists who knew who I was, or at least knew my identity, could communicate with me, and try to get Ben off the hook for being me. So that 9-month period was very interesting. It was it's the one time when I was truly sort of like Batman. You know what I mean? I was really truly a masked sort of phenomenon. And then they caught me. They finally caught up with me in Mountain View. I was arrested very dramatically in the open in the streets of Mountain View. It's in my book, Behind the Mask, the arrest and my capture. And then I held a press conference and admitted to being Commander X. They accused me, the FBI obviously accused me of many things, but one of them was being Commander X. And Jay Lederman, my attorney at the time, was very against it. He wanted to stick with ambiguousness. He didn't want me to admit that I was part of Anonymous or that I was Commander X or anything. And I said no. I'm going to hold a press conference and claim that namespace for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm not ashamed. And two, because I didn't want anybody to steal the namespace and do harm with it. I mean, a lot of work had gone into building the Commander X persona up by that point. And if I just abandon it, then anybody could pick it up. Any idiot could pick it up and conceivably do quite a bit of harm with that persona. So I felt that it was important right away, the day after I was released, to go in front of the media, do a press conference, and at least admit that I was in fact Commander X. So there's this great, in the original We Are Legion, it was actually cut for the final version, but the original We Are Legion, the one that was in the theaters first, there's actually this scene in the movie where I'm at the press conference holding up my indictment, and it's like, I am Commander X. I was very strident about it. And so that began a different period, a period of about, 6 months or so, where I was outed, but I was even more famous than I'd ever been. I was locally famous in the protest movement of Occupy and the homeless movement and everything. Now I had this whole added layer of fame of being this strange hacker dude. So I began using that to sort of fuck with the man. I became very potent within the Bay Area Occupy. Everything from giving speeches at large gatherings to giving seminars on old school protest tactics, that sort of thing. And that worked very well for me right up until December of 2011. At that point, I got a message. I had been involved in a bunch of building seizures, where that was a tactic that was actually an old school tactic that I was trying to reintroduce into Occupy, and was pretty successful at it, of the idea of taking over, specifically in my case, foreclosed banks, closed banks, like Wells Fargo, for instance, had gone bankrupt, and there were shit tons of Wells Fargo buildings everywhere, and they were empty. So that was the one we did. We did Wells Fargo in Santa Cruz. We took it over for 75 hours. We took over this entire bank that was empty. It was just not being used. That sort of spread like wildfire, and it's my opinion that that's what put me. They decided to shut me down at that point. But we had a leaker in the FBI Cybercrime Division, one of the agents in the FBI Cybercrime Division, and this is talked about in my book. It's sort of one of the, I guess I'm giving out spoilers now out of my book, but in there I talk about how for years I've had, I believe he's an agent, definitely an employee of the FBI Cybercrime Division, who leaks to me, and it's usually a very small nugget of data that's absolutely critical to my survival. And in this case, I got a message from this individual. It was 3 days before Christmas, 2011, and that message simply said, it was two sentences. It said, "They're coming for you. You have 48 to 72 hours tops. You will not be released from custody." And that was the message I received from my source within the FBI Cybercrime Division. So at that point, I had a decision to make very quickly. Do I want to be shut down potentially for decades, certainly for the next 3 years while I go through the CFAA trial process, or do I want to remain free, fighting, and able to speak online? And so the choice was, exile, to become a man without a country, or be shut down. And I had very little time. I had 48 hours to decide. I'll tell you, it took about 4 minutes. And actually, I've never told this story, even in the book, but it was actually a girl who made the decision. I had a lady I was dating at the time, and we didn't know whether we were going to take it further, like further into a more permanent relationship. So I asked her, I said, "Where are we going with this? Are we going somewhere permanent or not?" And she said no. So that was it. And she never knew. She never knew that she decided right then and there my fate. But and that was the last thing I had to check in on, and so that was it. And we had built an underground railroad. We had built it for that purpose, not for me to use, but for other possible Anons to escape to Canada. So we had this very intricate, very elaborate underground railroad already built in advance. And this is, again, talked about at length in Behind the Mask. I described this underground railroad, the components of it, the participants in it. It was very professional. It was a very strong network that we had designed to get any potential Anons who wanted to escape. And when we built that, and I was instrumental in building it, which is funny, when we built that, I had no clue that I was going to be the first one to have to use it. It was even before I was charged or anything that we built that. But it turned out that it worked quite well. And so I put myself in the Underground Railroad, and I was removed from the country by that network. It brought me slowly to the Canadian border, about 30 kilometers or so south of the Canadian border, and then I hiked across.
We need to make sure to put the links up for, so people have access to all of that information. So that we can not only reproduce it, we do need to get people out after operations like that, after successful operations, when they are being, persecuted by the government. We need to have ways to get them to safe places.
I said this in Behind the Mask, and I dwelled on it. I really feel like the original Underground Railroad that we built as part of OPV was amazing. It was amazing. But the thing is, it's not rocket science. It just took us believing we could do it and then finding the right people to build that network out. And I think it is essential that Anonymous and the resistance in general become adept at these sorts of covert actions and networks. It's going to become essential because this is going to be a long war. And if we can't protect our own, if we can't offer options to our fighters, to our people, then we're going to be behind the curve because they do look out for their own. They do go back for their own. They don't leave anybody behind. So we have to be at least as good at this game as they are. So I think it's
not a little bit
better.
better.
I think that it's essential that Anons begin to grasp the idea of covert actions and networks, and to see, in my books, exposed some of the ones that we built. Like it wasn't just the Underground Railroad. I talk about how we sent Anons into Syria during the early days of the protests there before it became a civil war. We sent Anons into Syria with medical supplies and candy for the children. And we did it strictly as a symbolic thing. We knew that Anonymous could not resupply the protesters. We did it because nobody else would. We did it because all the other states and governments in the world were ignoring the protests in Syria, and we wanted to highlight it. We sent a team into Bahrain, and we did this in the open. We did this in real time on Twitter. Both of these actions were actually done in Twitter with no coverage from the press, and except for my books, nobody would even know these actions took place. But we sent also 4 Anons, one of them from my own crew, into Bahrain, and they went on an incredible tour of the Shia villages there. They were only there for 24 hours, and they almost got caught. They did get arrested at the airport trying to leave. It was very dramatic, but they were there for only 24 hours. They never slept, and they were ferried. There were 10 Shia villages that we wanted them to visit, and they would blast into the village. The protesters would gather. They would hand out like thumb drives with tails and Tor and all that sort of stuff on it. And then they would get a PowerPoint presentation on counter surveillance and avoiding state surveillance. They were fed. They would do questions and answers while they were quickly fed, and then they would be ferried to the next village. And that's an amazing thing to organize. That's an amazing thing to do. And we did that as Anons. That was done under the flag of Anonymous. That was done by Anons. So, Anonymous has gotten this sort of bad reputation in the West lately, especially of being this very inept, very, not very serious sort of movement. But the fact of the matter is that some very, very serious covert actions and networks have been accomplished within Anonymous, and yet we weren't super spies. We weren't, soldiers. We were just normal Anons who said, I think we can do this. Let's try. So I tell people at the end of both books, be bold and believe that you can do these things too, because it's essential that you do them. You won't win without that kind of seriousness. Unless you can take it to that level, you won't win. They will crush you. We have to be able to do covert actions in networks. And so it's hopefully my books expose some of them, because again, the press never covers this shit. They only cover the sexy hacking stuff that Anonymous does. They never cover the whole depth and breadth of Anonymous actions, which span the whole gauntlet. I mean, they span the whole gauntlet of resistance. So anyway, yeah, buy the books.
I'm still.
They might inspire you.
Out so bad.
It might inspire you, give you some ideas. I think I'm proud of the books. They were written well. The story is engaging. You won't be able to put the book down, but also a lot of information. A lot of a lot of how we were able to accomplish some of these things. So, everybody's got their own way of doing things, but hopefully it'll give you some ideas.
Well, pitch them again, and including the links. It's been 4
Well,
hours.
Behind the Mask is the first book, and the URLs are pretty easy. They're all .cf domains. Behindthemask.cf will get you directly to that book. Again, they're all available in hardbound, paperback, and ebook, which is very, very cheap. It's only like $2 for an ebook. And then darkops.cf, which is the second book, tells the story of myself in Canada. And then on July 4th, you can visit the website now. There'll be a countdown timer eventually, but July 4th, I'm going to release the third book, which kind of, in my mind, ends the story. I don't actually have any interest or intention at this point to write any more about the story, but it does finish it in the sense that it tells you the story of how I came from Toronto and exile in Canada and how I came to be hopefully in final exile here in Mexico, which was quite a dramatic adventure to get myself from there to here. So that will kind of close the story out, and I'm going to keep writing books. Like I said, I've got some exciting books already in the works, but that will be the end of the X story. To be honest with you, I'm kind of tired of telling it. So, but I wanted to finish it. I wanted everybody to know how it ended, and it ends fairly happy. I'll have to admit, I'm very happy here in Mexico. I'm especially happy to have gotten my sister, who was in very, very much in harm's way because of me, and I was never able to be effective to help in that, to get her here safe in Mexico as well. It's tough when you do things that get people you love and care about hurt, and you feel you have to do them. So it's been a particularly tough. The personal thing has been particularly tough for me, because she bore a huge blunt of that, and her story is remarkable. She will be writing her own book, but from the day they kicked in her door to raid her because I had fled to Canada, everything was done to her that you can imagine. She was gaslighted, where they would go into her home and they would move things around. They would deliver her flowers on Mother's Day with a card that said it was from X. So she would think it was from me. She would think maybe that I had somehow snuck in there and left that. So there were all these sorts of tactics, and then the usual surveillance, the wiring of the phone, or just parking out front in the Crown Victoria day in and day out. That's harassment in and of itself. You know what I mean? Where you can't even go get your mail because you see them parked right there. So she endured years and years of this, but the final straw was the attempt on her life, where she was run off the road. She was chased down on a country road in Maine, and they ran her down in a sedan and rammed her from behind and forced her off the road. Her car flipped 4 times. Her back was broken and repaired with a 15-inch titanium rod, which now holds her spine together. It's the only thing that holds her spine together. They were able to reconnect the nerves, so she's able to walk, but her left leg was completely crushed. And when I say crushed, I mean like 30 breaks. And so it's been extensively repaired, and she walks with quite a serious limp. And she requires a lot of medication because the damage to her spine causes seizures. So she requires seizure medication, which is incredibly expensive here in Mexico. It's just off the charts. It's our biggest expense, is that one medication. But there are several others that she has to take in combination in order to just remain conscious and survive from such a traumatic injury. And so that was an actual assassination attempt where somebody attempted to kill her. And that became the pressure on my cell in Anonymous to try to find a way to get her to safety. And until the plan came to get me to Mexico, there was no viable plan to get her out of the country. Once we realized that I would probably be okay here in Mexico, then we folded her into the plan, and we brought her here in the aftermath of my arrival. We brought her here. So.
And this is the girl that's this is the girl that's actually active on Twitter too, right?
Yeah, you see her a lot on Twitter. She doesn't have a lot of followers. She's sort of low key that way, but you see me retweeting her, and we talk pretty openly. We tweet back and forth.
Yeah.
She's also my co-host on my weekly radio show, X Speaks. So you can hear Amy Beth, my sister, this Saturday. She'll be joining me with our special guest Tefpo, who's a rapper from St. Louis, was sort of foundationally instrumental within the Black Lives Matter movement in the Ferguson uprising. So it'll be an interesting
Yeah.
show. She's a great person, very, very intelligent, a very deeply involved activist. She actually has a lot in common with Marty G, where she specializes in her non-activism. Her focus is sort of children's issues. So like Op Pedo Hunt and the op against the Child Protection Services and the abuses of the CPS Child Protection Services. That anonymous op was actually started by her. So she's an anon in her own right and very active and within a very small circle of anons, I would say quite beloved. Certainly, her and Leanne DeHart have a very close relationship.
Okay.
She spent a lot of time writing to Matt DeHart. She's developed quite a personal relationship with Matt in prison. So she writes to all the prisoners. She sends them my books. She's like, any prisoner who wants a copy of my book, if they can find a way to get their information to Amy Beth, she will send them right off. She's sent dozens of books into prison, copies of my book into prison. And she's like my biggest fan, which is really cool. It's everybody needs somebody, right? And so
Yeah.
it's kind of cool. She's my little sister, so she looks up to me, and she's been my biggest supporter and my biggest fan online, and that's really special. I care about her a lot. It's good to have her here. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I see her very active. Maybe you want to bring her with you next time you come on the show. I mean, her story about this assassination.
I was thinking about that. She's very happy to come on the air. She loves your show. She every week inevitably listens to it straight through. She was excited to hear I'd be on tonight with you guys. Like myself, we have similar tastes, and we actually enjoy your show. I mean, it's a great show. It's a wonderful format, wonderful casual format to really explore and do issues. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm sort of hoping to be sort of a semi-permanent guest or maybe even part of the crew, because I like this format and it's different than what I do. X Speaks is a highly produced show. I mean, eventually, like I'm struggling right now. It's been the biggest struggle is to try to contain it within exactly 59 minutes. I think me and you were talking about it on Twitter about how I'm trying, because I want other people to pick up my show. I want them to rebroadcast it. And so I'm trying to do this like really highly produced thing. And that's okay. I mean, that's my thing. But you miss something in all that. And you miss this sort of casual ability to sit here and really have these far-flung, wide-ranging discussions. And so I think I'd like to do both. I'd like to be, a part, come on you guys' show as much as I can finagle my way on, but also be able to have, like I said, I do like my show. I do like the ability to bring a single guest in and then really just slam focus on what they're about. You know what I mean? But it's different. I love radio in general. To be honest with you, I just love radio. I've always loved radio. I think this is
finding the medium that. Finding the medium that's your medium. That's important too.
Well, it's an awesome medium because I'm very self-conscious on television. I've done a lot of TV. I've been in movies. You can go on my website commanderx.info and see endless two feature-length motion pictures I've been in, and then just dozens of television shows and TV interviews and shit. And I'm always very self-conscious. I hate the camera. I hate being watched, you know what I mean? But audio only is really cool because I feel much more freer to just be myself because it's just my speech. You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about how I look or how I'm coming across or my facial expressions or anything like that. I can just worry about my only thought is what I'm going to say next. You know what I mean? And to me, that's a precious sort of liberation for somebody who's sort of camera shy and doesn't really believe it or not, I don't really like the limelight. I know some people seem to think I do, but I would gladly be a hermit living on a mountain growing pot, which is what I was doing when I started all this. 10 years ago, when all this broke, I was living on the first ridge of the Santa Cruz Mountains growing wheat, and and I loved my life, and I would give anything to have it back, and be nobody again. So anybody who thinks I'm a fame fag and I just live for this shit, you're crazy. I mean, this is a job. Even coming on this radio show, to me, is part of the work. It's part of the job. It's part of what history handed me to do. I'm going to do it. But it's not, it wouldn't be my choice for a lifestyle, would be to do this day in and day out, and be all out there in the public and all up front. So radio to me is a comfortable in between. It's a comfortable compromise for, I feel like I can come out and be myself, and I don't mind having this huge audience. But I don't, like I said, I don't like television. I don't like video. So I'm intimidated if people are looking at me. You're not looking at me through my camera. Right? I know you. You got me hacked, right? Yeah.
I take it
No,
from
it's
your journey, though,
great,
that
guys.
you
I'd
had
love to
more to
come back.
fear from Canadian authorities than you do from Mexico.
No, I'll explore that with you if you're curious. It was interesting when we went across into Canada. When I went across into Canada, my team and especially my legal team began reaching out to Canadian government because we wanted to know if there's any possibility. First of all, we wanted an answer to the question, the same one that the DeHarts had when they came here. Is there any chance of legitimate asylum in Canada? And I wish that I could have spoken with the DeHarts ahead of time, because I might have saved them the time of coming up here. But we already knew that there was no chance, absolutely none. What we got back from the Canadian government was this, though, and it was interesting. We're also not interested in capturing you. What we would like is for you to lay low, step lively, and find somewhere else to live. And that's what we got back, believe it or not. That's the message that was sent back to us from the Canadian government. And I was not the only one that this approach was taken with. There was another famous activist who I was actually friends with. A young lady, well, she's not young anymore. She's a gray-haired old lady just like me. But when I met her, she was a young lady with Earth Liberation Front. And she was indicted in the United States for several arsons and was facing 100 years in prison. And she came up here to British Columbia and lived semi-openly for decades. And then she decided that she was old, she was gray, and she wanted to die at home. She wanted to see her family. And so she agreed to turn herself in. And so at first she went to the RCMP headquarters in British Columbia. They turned her down. They said, we've known where you are for decades. And if you want to turn yourself in, go to the border. I'm not kidding. They said no. So that was the approach the Canadian government took with me. Why would they take that? That might be your next question. The reason is that Canada is only 30 million people. It's a really small country. It may look huge on the map, but it exists only within about 100 kilometers of the border. That's it. 30 million people, 90% of them live within 100 kilometers of the border. That's Canada. The rest of it just looks good on a map, but there's nobody fucking there. Okay, it's a very small country with a very small cyberspace and very undefended. Anonymous could wreck Canada as easily as it wrecked Tunisia. I mean, that's how, so they actually feared Anonymous more than they feared any retribution from the United States. So throughout my stay up there, the U.S. would come to them and say, look, we know he's in Montreal. He just gave a big lecture to 150 people in public in Montreal. So we know he's there. We've got him on video talking to people in public. Go get him. So Canada would then put their hands over their eyes. Okay, if you can picture this, put their hands over their eyes and look everywhere, under the table, in the closet. Is he here? Is he here? Is he here? No, we don't see him. Sorry, Uncle Sam. We looked, but we just couldn't find him. And so that was the approach that Canada took. Basically, the entire time I was there was, they would never make any serious effort to actually apprehend me when they actually could have at any time. And so I knew that I had a relative amount of safety in Canada. But it's still not asylum. And I still couldn't come out in public safely. I couldn't get any identification or have any kind of a normal life. What Mexico offered was an opportunity because of the political situation between Donald Trump and Mexico is so horrible right now that Mexico wouldn't extradite a turnip to the United States of America at this point. I mean, I could be a mass murderer, and there would be almost zero chance that I will be extradited to the United States. So we're essentially taking advantage of a political window that exists where these two countries, essentially I'm playing two nation states against themselves to create a bubble of freedom for myself. That's manipulation. That's hackerism. But I'm going to play the United States against Mexico, and I believe it's going to, from our initial conversations with the Mexican government, it's going to work out just fine. They have zero interest in doing anything but punching Uncle Sam in the nose. So it's going to work out good for me. Like I said, our biggest problem right now is twofold. One is the medical situation. We're trying to find a way to fund, particularly this prescription drug regimen that Amy Beth is on for her injuries from the attempt on her life. That's very expensive, so we're trying to either raise money right now or find some other income source whereby we can take care of that. And then the legal front, we need to have a Mexican attorney. And then I think we'll be able to announce, by the end of the year, we'll be able to announce the first hacktivist ever to receive political asylum in a foreign country, specifically against the CFAA. And I think it's a huge step in the battle of the CFAA. If even one hacktivist who faces CFAA charges can be granted legitimate asylum in a foreign country, it raises everybody else's case. It helps Akron Phoenix 420. How does it not, right? If the same circumstance has gained somebody asylum. So it's hopeful that we can build something and we can do something that's not just about us, but it helps the entire movement. And then we really like this compound that we're in, and we have plenty of room. You can get very large buildings here for very, very cheap, and that's what we've done. And so what we'd like to do is build a place where maybe we can bring other dissidents, and we're willing to do that. We're willing to bring other hacktivists and anons here and provide them with everything, provide them with housing, provide them with legal assistance, medical assistance. It's our hope that eventually we can build something up like that, but we can't do it without support. We can't do it without people who also believe in it and are willing to help us. But if people are willing to help us, we think we can build something very exciting that will help all of us, not just myself and my sister. I hope I answered the one fellow. I got to learn you guys' names. The one fellow with the Canadian question. I like him a lot. He's the conservative on the show, right? Am I right or am I wrong? Am I speaking through my ass? He's like
No,
he's our resident conservative. But I mean,
I like it.
Hey, fam,
I love him. I love him.
I just gotta put this announcement out there. We only got like 2 minutes left.
But I think that's what makes our show so much different is that we deliberately find the diversity that's like real. You know, the diversity that you see on corporate media, it's not real. It's all talking heads and agendas and all of that stuff. Where all of us are experts in our field, you know, but we're all regular guys. Like, we're really what the world looks like.
I just want to say to you, Mr. Conservative, that I really dig you. I think you're a cool cat, and you're 10 times less fucking obnoxious than that fucking clown sect dude was the other day. So, you know what I mean? You've got my vote, man. I like you a lot, man. I would love to have a good fucking ripping argument with you, man. That'd be awesome, man. Someday we'll get to it, man. I'm sure.
All right, 1 minute left, guys. Make your announcements. There you go.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us, and I hope you do get the opportunity and the time to come on with us more often. There's so much that needs to be talked about. When you do
anytime
launch your new book, you know, please send us the links and all of that so we can push that as much as possible as well.
Anytime, guys. I'm yours.
I really appreciate it.
I'll come on regular, so. No problem. I'm glad. I thank you guys so much for having me. You guys are the coolest cats on the internet, man.
All right, thanks.
Now that is a compliment.
Sincere one.
All right, guys, and all.
Anonymous Bites Back rocks, man.
Thank you.
Everybody should be listening to this radio show. Everybody.
Did we finish?
I'll run with the outro.
I'm done. I have no announcements. Buy my books. CommanderX.info. Because if you don't buy my books, I'm going to starve. No. It is.
You need to hold up a puppy. Do you want the puppy to starve?
All right, I'm running out the credits right now.
Declare this to be an unlawful assembly.